we
right.
go.
Oh my God, we did it. We did it. We're
We
doing it.
did it. What?
We're on the way. Okay, let me put some strange powders into a beverage, and then let's get going.
No
This
worries.
is magnesium and vitamins, and that's basically all that's in it. Oh, and a little bit of L-theanine, which is quite helpful.
Yeah, I was about to say, getting your daily intake there is pretty important.
Mm-hmm. Water too. I see you drinking the hydrating stuff, the Life
Oh yeah,
Nectar.
gotta stay hydrated. That's self-care, you know?
Absolutely. So, okay, I guess let's start there. You talk a lot about self-care. Um,
Sure.
there are a lot of good reasons for that, including like some very very literal and business reasons. This is your background. Um,
Right.
so let's start there. Where are each of us like coming from in terms of overall background? So I talk a lot about that on my channel. I know that you're a practicing psychologist.
Right.
Where you from? What did you start doing? Why are you doing what you're doing?
So I am from the United States, right? Originally, I did go ahead and study abroad in Europe for a good number of years. That's sort of
Okay.
where I got my master's. I
Okay.
had my own,
Awesome.
I practiced over there. I did pretty much everything, and then I came back and I was like, you know what? Something's missing in the space. I feel like I'm
Hmm.
going around. We're on YouTube, and I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit as we go on
Mm-hmm,
our
mm-hmm.
talk here. And it's like there's a lot of things that are like missing in terms of psychology, like today, like modern psychology, and sort of how it can actually impact the space going further. So
When
it was
when
one
you
of those.
say when you say the space, what do you mean? You mean YouTube? You mean the internet? You mean the world? What's the space?
So the space that I mean is quite literally like social media in general,
Yeah.
and the space is also in psychology in of itself. And I love to throw it out this way because we have a lot of good foundations. For example, we have Jung, right?
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal. His archetypes, absolutely great reads. Bowlby, attachment, all of that. But then
Cool.
after a certain while, it's like we stopped sort of progressing into trying to go ahead and get more thoughts into like modernity. What's happening in the
Mm.
here and now.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it has only been like, oh yeah, we're gonna go ahead and talk about theoretical knowledge rather than applied knowledge and try and see how we can relate to like this new generation that's coming up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I do see that. I see in a lot of different fields a lot of verging toward theory instead of application, and
Right.
this sort of a feeling of armchairiness, which is funny because both of us are sitting here in essentially armchairs talking about stuff, right? This is what we do is we
Right.
theorize about things, but that's really interesting that sort of lack of application, and so that somehow led you into the process of doing instead of thinking, and the process that you came to in doing was to stream on Twitch.
Well, yeah, we started off on YouTube,
Right,
right?
right. Because I watched your first video. Oh, that's somewhere that I should start as well. Is that
Sure.
I watched your first video, and early on in it, that you mentioned that you had a tendency to have nosebleeds when you connect a bunch of ideas together, and that was such a really interesting thing to hear you say, because I had been thinking about that process of eureka moments, or like revelations, or moments where a bunch of puzzle pieces sort of come together and click, because I've experienced a number of them in the last few months, weeks, and I've watched a couple of my friends experience a number of them, and it's just awesome to experience. So you talking about that as a specific event kind of clarified some ideas for me, so that's really cool.
Oh, well, first off, I'm glad that it helped out a little bit in connecting a lot of those events. But yeah, like it's sort of a meme, like in chat in general, I guess. A
Hmm.
lot of times it's like, oh, he's gonna connect, he's about to have a nosebleed, get your paper.
that's
And I'm
that's
like,
awesome.
it's such an amazing feeling, like both seeing, for example, anime, video games, anything, and connecting the dots. And then
Hmm.
like as a therapist as well, when you're helping out people and they're able to go ahead and like put a lot of their own little pieces together and be like, wait a minute, I think I'm starting to understand where everything's connecting. And you see that aha moment, you're like, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go. That's some good work.
Yeah, that tracks. It makes me really enthusiastic and interested in therapy as a process. I will say, I'll just say it straight out. I have never
Sure.
gone to specifically psychotherapy, which is interesting that I've never gone, because I have an immense amount of respect for the process and the understanding and the learning and all of that. But I suppose that's in on my list of dragons that I have to go out and fight. So just this past week, I went to the doctors for the first time in 6 years or something, and I had built up this set of fears around going there, and like, oh gosh, the system doesn't work, and oh gosh, it's never never going to be anything for it. And I'm going to find out that I have a terminal disease and the dragon's going to eat me and it's going to be bad. So I
Right.
went and I made the appointment and I went to the damn doctor's office and I killed the dragon and there wasn't really a dragon there and it was fine and the doctor was nice and I'm pretty healthy, I think. And done, right? So therapy's the next thing on that list probably.
Well, first off, hey, good job on getting checked up, and I recommend that to everyone. Like, if go get your
Totally.
yearly checkups. Do what
Totally.
needs to be done because it's scary. I'm not gonna lie. Even as a therapist, hey, I'm scared of going to go to the doctor for any checkups, or even like when I
Oh,
go see
yeah.
my a psychologist, my psychologist or whatever. I'm also like, ooh, how much am I intellectualizing and like over fearing because of like my knowledge and stuff, rather than like
Totally.
going in there and actually like hearing what they have to say.
Totally. And I think it's a danger probably to go around walking around going like, well, I understand people pretty well, so I understand myself pretty well. And if you don't have
Right.
enough mirrors around you to reflect back to you whether that's true or not, you can go down some weird rabbit holes and really sort of spiral out of control. And so we sort of spiral through our discussion toward the purpose, I think, of to some extent what we're doing. And the reason that I threw down this gauntlet in the first place was so that we could talk about this and talk about the
Sure.
question of like, what are we doing and why is it interesting? Because I started this out and I didn't know the answer to that question at all, but I've come closer to understanding it just by following the things that I find compelling. And one of those things is just talking about the stuff that I find interesting. So
Right.
that's the big question in the space. And it's the question that I sort of inherently asked by saying, I want to be the best at this. Because when you say that, you immediately have to ask the second question, which is the best at what and what does the best mean?
Right.
And so what are we doing and why are we doing it and how do we get better at it and what's the goal state? Because it's not just watch the funny thing and go hee hee ha ha, except that it is just that sometimes too, and that's something great that you pointed out as well. So
Yeah.
we're doing this thing that's complicated and multi-layered and nobody's really articulating what it is that we're doing, but thousands and thousands of people are in a reactor space and constantly seeking out information from people that they've come to trust or have some kind of parasocial relationship with. And I think there's power. I think there's something interesting in it.
Oh, I was about to say you're hitting on so many questions and so much, information that I as well have pondered live on stream. You walked in on some of those times where I'm like, wait a minute, what are we doing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening? Because it feels as though, and
Hold
we
on.
can
I'm
go
going to
into
alter this to move you so that it looks to you like I'm looking at you.
sure.
I'm gonna try to at least. Hold on.
I'm like, trust me, I also have you on like another monitor, so I'm like,
Yeah, I'm moving you to another monitor so that I'm like looking. How do I make this work? I just want to align you with where my camera is so that I'm looking at you and we're like making faux eye contact because
right.
that's like so important overall. And then I need to rearrange this so that my lighting is proper because screens produce so much lighting. And there we
Yeah.
go. Okay, now I can just look at you.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say before we get into this, you want to introduce yourself for people that don't know you
Yes,
on my
yeah,
side as well.
absolutely. Thank you. I'm always scattered. I have that habit. In terms of, I assume that you're familiar with Big Five traits.
Uh-huh.
I'm really quite low in conscientiousness and quite high in openness. Probably too much so. And so I part of that is ending up jumping around a little bit. And so thank you for keeping me on track. I appreciate it.
I got you.
Yeah, I am T. Recently, I am going to be pivoting from being just Tiabu to being just T, who is also Tiabu, and also T&D, and also maybe other projects in the future, because my identity being just that guy who watches anime is a little too restrictive for me. And that's a role that I want to be able to step into and then step back out of. But I am T from Tiabu and from T Talks Too Much, because I talk too much about the things that I find compelling, and I'm going to continue doing so no matter what anybody tells me, and I'm going to try to make the way that I talk as compelling as possible and talk about things in interesting ways with interesting people. And so you're the first of those as an interesting person that I'm on live stream trying to talk to, and I did it sort of on a weird whim because it felt like it was necessary, sort of like you
Sure.
said, there seemed like there was something lacking in the space. And one of the things that I think is lacking in the space is that there are a lot of people with their nose to the grindstone doing the thing and not a lot of people talking about the thing that we're doing with each other. And I'd like to get into that side of the space really hard.
And I 100% agree with you. I feel as though, for example, oftentimes we're too into our grindstone, putting up editing, putting up videos, constantly doing our talks, whatever needs to go ahead and happen, that
Yeah,
we forget, hey, you know what? There are others in this space as well that are thinking the same things. And
totally.
for the most part, we forget to reach out to others as well. So I think that's huge.
Totally.
And I applaud you for that.
No, I think that's true in probably in every space in a lot of ways. Anything that's interesting, there are probably dozens of people, if not hundreds of people all over the world with the same ideas. And if they were to use the magic of our ability to connect with each other, like I don't need to know where you live, we can talk face to face.
Right.
What the fuck is that, right? Like, and we don't use that. We just sit around going, "Oh, I'm so lonely and I'm so sad and we can do this. Like we can do this thing."
Right.
And it's powerful, and we might end up going and doing it live, and you've been doing it with your friends live. I have my own problems with the live space. It's just hard for me to deal with it. I like to be able to contain myself in editing and try things in a safe way and then delete them if I don't like them, instead of just stream of consciousnessing constantly. And that's kind of because of my habit of jumping around.
Right.
Um,
And it's a lot of work, to be honest with you, because
yeah,
distractions come in, chat's going all the time. Your setup can mess up at any time. You can't really like
totally.
edit in the process. But that's why I'm like, for like, because I've seen some of your videos, T, and I'll be straight up, I respect your work.
Thank
And I
you.
know I've said this before, and like we've talked about it back and forth, but like legitimately, I've seen the way that you managed to go ahead and do your talks, your editing for your reaction
Mm.
videos, and so on and so forth. And I've just been talking with some people in the community, and I'm like, that takes a lot of work, guys. Like,
Oh yeah.
it's not just simple, okay, I've done the reactions, I've done what I needed to do and throw it up on YouTube. Like,
Mm-mm.
there's a lot of work, a lot of background work that goes into setting something up like that.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's also a little, and to some extent the work is very constrained. It's like a couple hours of really hard labor, and then the rest of the
Sure.
time is like the slow process of allowing yourself to try to percolate and understand the media. And I'm trying to find that
Right.
balance, right? I've oscillated back and forth over my channel's career of like doing too much and doing too little and doing too much and doing too little. I don't know if you know, but a couple of years ago, I did Treasure Hunt as a thing. I was like, I'm going to watch episode 1 of every single seasonal anime when it comes out. Fantastic idea for getting a really good picture of what's going on in anime. Terrible idea
Right.
for being a functional human being. Just terrible, because you're watching like 4 episodes of 4 different shows per day. It's just smashing your brain with content. It's just too much. It just doesn't work. So you oscillate and you get down to something closer to the thing. And that's part of why I wanted to talk to you, is because like you're gonna figure out things that I haven't figured out, and I've already
Right.
figured out things that you're not going to figure out unless you do like a year's more's worth of stuff. And so if we can figure that stuff out and share it with each other, we can save each other time and get better together. And that's really rad.
And honestly, yeah, that's what it's about. It's about, because a lot of people, honestly, and I want to go ahead and throw this out there. A lot of people, for some reason, have this weird competition mentality,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Where they're
totally.
trying to compete with like other people, and other people in this space all have different missions, which I'm sure is
Mm
what we're going to go into. We all
hmm.
have
Mm hmm.
different goals, different ideologies, and everything. And the biggest person that you can compete with naturally is yourself.
Oh,
If we're
every
going to be
time.
realistic, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what's going to lead into this question before we go into the overarching theme. It's,
Cool.
for you, especially since you're, I see that you're really creative. You're really like, you're on it when it comes to a lot of your discussions. I've been there and I'm like, oh, I didn't see that, especially when it comes to a lot of your Mushoku Tensei reactions.
Yeah,
I've been
those have
there
been
because,
great. Those have been. I mean, I'm not saying like necessarily. I think my reactions have been really good. I'm proud of them, frankly.
right.
I think they've been great. And Mushoku is really cool and has a lot of layers to it. So,
And
ah, it's been
I have a
fun to
lot of
let
people.
loose.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I have a lot of people in my community that have been like, "Yo, you have to check him out." Like, this was before we even connected. And I was like, "All right, cool." So I started checking out your Mushoku Tensei videos and your discussion pieces. I'm like, "Wow, I did not think about it through this particular," because you were looking at it through a film perspective, I believe.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and I was like, putting that together, that helps out so much more in my understanding of the series going forward as well, rather than just using one frame. So for you, my question is, seeing as though you have a lot going on in your life and whatnot, how do you balance out, say, like the perfection nature of trying to go ahead and like keep everything edited, versus
Hmm.
sometimes the chaotic nature of like it can't all be perfect, right?
The answer is as well as I can, which is poorly, and I stumble forward continuously. Uh,
Oh,
uh, as a balancing act, I feel like it's the nature of doing. I recently read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, and
That's
it has been extraordinary and eye-opening for me. But the one that keeps popping back up into my head is the photography class example, where they divided a photography class into two groups, and the one group was the quality group, and the one group was the quantity group. And they said, for the quality group, all you have to do, you'll be graded at the end of the semester on one photograph, but it better be perfect, right? And on the quantity group, they said, it doesn't matter how good your photographs are, you're only going to be graded on the number of photographs. And in every case, the quantity group individuals took way better photographs than any of the quality group, because as we were talking about at the very beginning, a lot of armchair thinking is very fun and very interesting and can get you somewhere, but actually taking a couple hundred photographs is going to teach you so much more. And so my answer to the balance question is, I worry about it as little as I can, and I try to do as much as I can when I can, if I can, I guess.
See, I feel like for some reason you just hit something like a pin that I've been going on for a good little bit as well. Because I've been bringing up Atomic Habits for the past couple of weeks and months
Nice.
as well. Because it's a great book, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I highly recommend it for people to go ahead and like start switching over into new habits. But like, and as we have our conversation, I'm gonna go ahead and pin that example that you just said of like, the whole picture example that they
Mm-hmm.
gave, because I feel it's gonna be very important for later on in the discussion.
Okay,
So.
cool. Yeah.
But anyway, let's go back on topic. What was the main question, mate?
Main question on which side? I think we tangented out of me introducing myself, but I wanted to say one thing more on what you got and what I got, I think, because you
Sure.
mentioned a film perspective, and I do actually have some of that in terms of some formal class training
Right.
and stuff on that front. I didn't pursue it because I'm kind of a fool, and because I bought into the whole idea that no, you really need to get a degree in computer science so that you can make a good living and be stable, instead of pursuing
Right.
the art and stuff that you're really good at. Because I've been reading and focused and interested in reading and stories and myths and all these ideas since I was a baby little kitty boy, and I pivoted into technology and science and computer because it seems really interesting, and it'll probably come up to become really valuable for me in the future. But
Right.
it wasn't what I should have necessarily pursued. Although I'll probably pivot it into something really fantastic at some point, and I hope to. I still found myself seeking the value in film and the value in art, and not understanding why I was so compelled by it. But I took some classes, and I took specifically some classes with a professor whose name escapes my mind now. I went to the College of William and Mary in Virginia.
Right.
That's where I was educated, and it's a solid school. And I had a film professor there who I took a number of classes with, who was very focused on Japanese film and cinematography. And so we went through some of the older works of Japanese film and the baseline works of Japanese horror and stuff. And that stuff let me characterize and understand so much of what I had already been trying to grasp at in anime. It gave me a lot of those clickety moments, and I found that really compelling. So I bring some of that perspective, but at core, I don't think of myself as a watcher. I think of myself as a reader. And that is something that my father drilled into me by handing me books from a very, very young age. And so while I have a passing familiarity with a lot of things and have read a little bit about a lot of things and try to bring all of that to bear on as many things as I can, I don't have a lot of depth of knowledge on stuff like psychology. I read the entire DSM-4 when I was like 12 or 13, and
Yeah.
because my dad made me do it, it was the 4 at that point, it wasn't the 5.
Right.
So I read it top to bottom, and it blew my mind in multiple directions, but I don't understand that much of it or remember that much of it, and I didn't have that much background in it to really understand it. So I've got some of the art stuff, and I've got some of the film stuff, and I've got some of the systems design and computer stuff, but I don't have a lot of the human psychology stuff. And so that's the stuff that you have. And just watching you come into the first video that I saw of yours and be like, I want to analyze these characters and I want to potentially diagnose, was the word that you used, but I feel like you've sort of moved away from that specifically and more toward talking about the way that the stories are flowing, because that's where the compelling stuff is. But I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, that's where I come from, and where I feel like you come from, and what I feel like I want to get from you most.
Sure.
And that's it. Yeah.
So one thing I did want to go ahead and state with that is like at first, like especially when it comes to, and actually before I even go into this, you do a lot of actual natural psychology with your observations and the way that you manage to go ahead and I guess like put it in layman's terms, right? Because that's the
Hmm.
overall goal. It's like go ahead and make it accessible for people that like, a lot of these terms, for example, like propinquity, parataxic distortion, so on and so forth,
Hmm.
end up causing bigger struggles for people that don't know those words because not everyone has access to, uh, you know, know like knowledge, specifically when it comes to those words, or you know,
Yeah.
some of the higher level vocabulary, which honestly can be like brought down to like today's standards, whatever that terminology is. So I applaud you for that because like you legitimately, when
Thank
it comes to a
you.
lot of the discussions that you do and your observations, it is very like, hey, you know what? We can relate to that. I see where you're coming from, and we can go from there. But yeah, the way that I view it is, yeah, from a psychological perspective, but it's also like, hey, you know what? If I was doing therapy with these
Hmm.
characters and they were to come in and they were telling me this story, right? Where would I take it from there?
Got
What
it.
what avenue would this approach? And I moved away from the diagnostic element because realistically, like I hate to put it this way, but at least in the United States, like being diagnosed is like the biggest thing for insurance companies. If we're going to be realistic about it, um,
Hey. Oh boy, are we going to talk about underlying systemic problems in the healthcare system? Oh, we. No, we don't
we
know.
can,
We don't need to
but
get
not
there.
now.
Not today.
Yeah,
Not today. Not today. Maybe in a future
but
talk.
that's why it's like moved away from that to like, all right, what is their narrative that they're sharing, and what is the good and bad that like, what are some of the flaws, the cognitive distortions, all these different issues that are happening, and how
Yeah.
can we tell this in a compelling way so that people understand, hey, I can relate to this character that's going through these issues, and
Hmm.
these issues, as you can tell, are cognitive distortions or this and that, and it's gives a further understanding of oneself while watching anime and video game characters.
Ooh,
So,
that's some sauce there. That's some excellent stuff that you just put out there. I think that's right on the money, yeah, in at least one layer. In
sure.
that people are compelled or drawn to or relate to characters because characters are people, right? Or more accurately, in the you're familiar with Plato and the cave,
Of
Shadows
course.
on the Wall. Characters are closer to the ideal. They're where a couple of different shadows intersect, right?
Right.
They're extracted stories that somebody, each mangaka sort of observes the universe and he observes the people around them, and they extract an archetype or a character from that. That's the Jungian sort of idea
Yeah.
there, and then they put it into their story like this is how that type of person would act in this sort of situation, and people who have things that relate to that sort of a character relate to that character and don't necessarily know or can't necessarily articulate why. And so I think that process of articulation, of putting it into layman's terms, as you said, is the biggest hurdle to understanding. And I think people have a propensity to say, well, I do relate to this, but that's just because it's fun, or that's just because
Right.
it's media. And there's nothing wrong with that one bit, I don't think. But I'm interested in trying to explain it in a way that tickles the rational part of the brain as well, because art is, it speaks for itself in terms of your artistic brain. You look at
Right.
you look at a trigger show or a piece of really compelling media, and it's like, wow, that was really cool. I couldn't tell you why forever. And people forever have gone and sought out critics and the thinkers who are trying to understand, not just observe, and
Right.
use that to expand their own understanding. And so trying to do that just by expressing what I see, just that is enough. But then what I think about what I see is another layer to it. And if I can bring to bear what I think everyone that I've read who has interesting thoughts might think about what I see, and bring that into play, then we get sort of that collective-y,
Unconsciousness
really,
of it.
really ideating what this myth means and really putting it together. Um, um, and the process that I've come to most recently is the thing that you already do because you're in live chat constantly back and forth, but it's
Right.
directly and specifically speaking to my audience members about it, and then taking their thoughts and their reflected thoughts that I get back in the comments and highlighting and talking about those and back and forthing on those
Right.
produces, it's like social reflection and child development. It's like beyond necessary, and we don't have enough of it one bit, and when we gotta fix it. Okay,
Right.
so 20
So,
billion ideas dropped. Have fun.
right. Well, with that, and I think this is why, and I love chat because a lot of people think,
Yeah.
oh yeah, chat, like especially like comments or live chat is always going to be there to support you. No, I'll let you guys know straight
Oh
up. My
no.
chat is challenging me on like a lot of like fundamental stuff that's out there, right? I throw up systems of power and control and how
Hmm.
certain situations could lead to domestic violence, and I'm getting challenged off of like certain symptoms of certain things that may have happened in their life, and now you have a discussion that you can go into and a
Totally.
further understanding of situations like that, right? Which is why I think it's always important, as much as we like to hold up a mirror onto the shows and the games and everything, that books that we're extrapolating on, that we're analyzing, that we're discussing, it's
Hmm.
always important for those individuals that are watching our content to hold that mirror back up to us and
Oh
allow us to
yes.
see the growth. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and so important to um well to hem in our own tendency to arrogance, because when you're sitting here listening to yourself talk, which is what
Yeah.
we do, right? And then you're editing yourself and listening to yourself talk again, and then you're putting up the video and you're going, this is a good thing that I said, and that's really smart. You have to be really aware that you might be just wrong. You might be straight up
Yeah.
wrong, and you might not know anything. Not only do you not know everything, you might not know anything, and you might have just blathered some idiocy out into the internet. And so you have to. How do you build systems into your systems that actively engage with you and criticize you? And how do you build the friendships and social groups and relationships with people who are capable of seeing you from an outside perspective and telling you before you go off the deep end? It's a
Right.
challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Well, I was about to say, let's be honest. It's the two big things that a lot of people have issues with: boundaries, setting up clear and direct boundaries with people, and communication,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are afraid to communicate and start any sort of confrontation, because confrontation
Yes.
means, oh, there's high levels of anxiety present. Oh, we're not going to be in that therapeutic state or that openness state, because
Hmm.
there's a system of theory out there called the polyvagal system, right? And it essentially,
Regarding Vegas, the
yeah,
Vegas nerve and
regarding,
around. Okay, cool.
regarding, yeah,
So
regarding the
so I got
vagus
the
nerve.
biological pathways at least.
Yeah, it has the biological pathways in this intervention system. And it essentially states, like, when it comes to confrontations, if we're not able to be at least in a form where we're like both able to talk about it in a clear, direct way and calm, we're gonna go into a sympathetic nervous system where we're just
Mm.
arguing. It's fight or flight,
Hmm.
and it's one point or the other, and there's
Elevated, and all of the autonomic systems go online, and your adrenaline is rushing, and there's nothing that you can do, and it's just
right.
over. Yeah, 100%.
Which is why I think, like, when it comes to communication and setting up those boundaries, it's always important to be like, hey, you know what, like, here are the boundaries. And it's hard to do, even as like creators as we are, because there's a lot of parataxic distortion. There's a lot of people that like
Could you could
have
you
this
explain that
idea.
term? Could you explain that
Sure.
term, because I don't know it off the top of my head.
So parataxic distortions is essentially like the beautification, the angelification status of those
Oh,
that you see on, like, some.
pedestalizing and raising up on high. Got it. Okay, cool. So just because I have a platform means that I must know what I'm doing, which is false, right? Got it. Okay, cool,
Exactly.
cool, 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 cool.
Or just because I'm in your Discord, and you've interacted with me nice all the time, means that you're a nice person 1,000% of the time, right?
Sweet. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's automatically having those thoughts, and instead of being able to, like, hey, you know what, you messed up in this action, you should clarify this. No, are you kidding me? T or Ed can't do that. He's a wonderful individual. He would never mess up. He's not a human.
Mm.
He's like, it's
Hmm.
all of these weird titles and roles that people might put on you without you necessarily even thinking that they're being placed on you.
That's
So
that's really interesting to put out there. That's really interesting that you mention it, because I've been getting a lot of the opposite. I've opened myself up in my Discord really heavily to some serious criticism in the last few weeks, and been like super open, and oh, it's been rough, and people have been not shy about criticizing, like down to the core, and being quite
right.
concise and thoughtful, and putting it together in terms of getting right down to it in the criticism, and right to the nub of it, and it's been beautiful. So I don't know if I'm experiencing much of that. I don't know. And the question that comes up in my mind is, like, how would you be able to check that in your own systems? Like, how would I be able to prevent that as a creator who runs a Discord and has these social systems that I run and am to some extent in charge of? How do you maintain and monitor and prevent that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, you're doing it already. You opened yourself up to criticism,
So there
right?
it is.
And, and there's a lot of creators that are afraid of being open to criticism or being open to, say, even a challenge or a conversation where it's like, hey, where am I messing up and where can I grow?
Totally.
Um, You asking those questions, and I always like love to put this whenever you're watching a piece of media or even a person go through something, always ask the five W's, or like, what, when, why, how, so on, so forth,
Okay.
where, right? Or
Yeah.
when. Because that way you're able to go ahead and understand a little bit further as to like where's your intent? What is going on in their life? Sort of like go out a little bit and then come back in. It's a good
Hmm.
tool to always have and to build empathy off of. Because, for example,
Yeah.
you opening yourself up, hey, yeah, it's hard to hear some of the criticism that people might have because you might be like, I thought I was doing really good here, but apparently people liked it when I did something a little bit different.
Hmm.
Um, it enables that empathetic nature where you're like, okay, I can see where I'm messing up and I want to improve on myself and I want to like help get there with the audience that you're creating. So
Yeah.
that's strong. I
Yeah,
have a
it's
question.
hard. Yeah, go for it.
And this might hit on one of the big topics. And I know we're probably going to go deep into this,
That's
which
good.
is
Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it
uh,
up.
it's a big Jungian theory, but I'm sort of modernizing it here
Okay,
by
let
adding.
me get a piece of paper
Sure,
so I can have a notey thingy just in case. Hit me. Shoot.
sure. So my question for you is, when you hear the term hype beast or emoji reactors,
Yeah.
what comes to mind?
A thumbnail going
Uh-huh.
and like big lettering all over and sort of chaos and some arrows and stuff. A quick intro or like an overly long intro to the video that's mostly shilling their products, Patreon, sponsors, stuff like that. And then a really short cut up chunk of the episode as blocked off as possible with as little of the cool content and as many of the most eye-catching and like valuable potentially statements that they can get out as possible, smashed together and like zoom cuts and fast edits in order to try to get you to be excited about the thing so that you go elsewhere and pay for more of the thing. That's what I usually think of.
Okay,
But
that's question. Uh-huh.
I also think of my favorite hype beast reactors, which
Uh-huh.
are I'll just say right out are Hida22 reacts, who are
Uh-huh.
stellar and interesting and do a ton of their own editing and are just hype people who are having fun watching anime. And I think that there
Right.
is something extraordinarily compelling about observing a piece of media with somebody or observing them observe it, regardless of the depth at which they are observing it. Just seeing their expressions and micro expressions does some of that social confirmation stuff that's well beyond important for the individual. That's my answer to some extent. What do
Well,
you
I was about
think?
to say, and you answered my second question there, which is what is the value that you see in that? Because this is a
Okay, there it
question
is.
that I've asked myself for a good while, and I actually did a lot of research, like self-research, being able to go and like sit there and like watch through hours and hours worth of like hype reactions, right?
Totally.
And going through that, like, I've been able to go ahead and come up with my own solutions. But even further, I'll go ahead and do this. I tend to do group therapies as well, like art therapy. Sometimes I play D&D with teenagers and adults as a form of
We
therapy
got
in
to talk about
itself.
D&D. I ran a
Oh,
D&D
bro.
game yesterday. I DM and am in that space as well. I don't know how to fit it with everything else, but gosh, it's one of those things that I'm stumbling forward into, and so we'll talk about that. Anyway, go ahead, continue. You did
Okay.
your own
Yeah,
research.
I love D&D, don't get me wrong.
Woo!
Like I'm like it's one of my go-to things.
Yeah.
But specifically when it comes to like, for example, the term, like when you hear emoji reactors, what comes into play? What comes into mind? Asking, kids ranging from 7 to 18,
Hmm.
immediately what you get are the same things, which is interesting because it's become an automatic archetype where they don't even have to understand YouTube. They don't have to understand social media in general because it's so prevalent in society now, where you're
Really?
like, oh
Wow.
yeah, like, what do you think a reactor is? And the majority of them are like, instantly, like they go into that face, they start being
Uh-huh.
like, oh, like, all over the top and
Uh-huh.
stuff. And you're like,
Uh-huh.
it's interesting that, a lot of people growing up, that's their first image as to what a reactor is.
Yeah.
Uh, just in that term. And so at first, I'll be honest, I had like jokingly, I'd be like, oh yeah, at least I'm like, I'm gonna emoji react in a second or throw some jokes out there.
Yeah,
People took
yeah,
that way
yeah.
too seriously. People are like, dude, you're shitting on emoji reactors. No, guys, I like, everyone has their worth. Like just straight up. And even through this, one of the big things that like, just being able to run, being able to talk with people it seems as though for a lot of people, that's their form of self-care nowadays. They come home
Yeah.
from their 9 to 5. They come home and their way that like they don't manage to express a lot of their emotions at work. And boom, they're watching someone watch their favorite show, play their favorite video game, getting
Hmm.
hyped about it. And guess what? They're running through all the facial expressions, either sadness, because guess what? You get stuck on a sad tier reactors, and you're like going on for the next sad
Oh
episode,
my
next.
God! Just a loop of depressing. Watching other people experience the sads real hard.
Sad,
Oh,
yeah,
totally. Well, all emotion is compelling. We know that every
right.
emotion has valence and is almost magnetic in its own right, or gravitational. And as you move toward anger, you want to move more toward anger. But also, emotion is super exhausting. So you hope to burn out in that, but some of them are not exhausting, and some people can go forever and ever on that front.
Right.
Ooh,
And that's why it's like it's really interesting when you start hearing conversations and you start having conversations with people about that, where they're like, this is how I'm able to go ahead and release a lot of the emotions since they don't have access to therapy or they don't have access to a good person or a friend to vent to. It sort of
that's
becomes that
yeah.
it sort of becomes that like interaction where now they feel close to this individual that's hyping on screen, screaming, crying, whatever it is, because they're sharing the same emotions that they feel.
That's fascinating that you bring it up that way. Um, Hold on. I have an idea that's sort of spiraling on the tip of my tongue. Let me see if I can get it out into bullet
Sure.
points on paper for a second. Cool. I see a number of different things that are all in the same sort of space in an interesting way, and some of them are things that have led me toward my path of doing what I'm doing, whatever that thing
Right.
is that because even to put that label on ourselves to say reactor is a little bit weird because I don't know about you, but I spend a lot more of my time discussing than I do reacting. And that's sort of that is reaction, right? I am acting in and speaking in relation to a piece of media. So inherently
Right.
I'm doing a reactive thing to it. But I'm doing it in the context of like almost like an ad hoc unformulated video essay that I'm just sort of unconsciously spilling out there. But to even say reacting or reactor is not quite right because that process is such a small process of what both of us are doing and what
Right.
most of the people who I most identify with in the space are doing. They're doing
Right.
more. It's more like analysis or investigation or attempts at comprehension or something like that. The other things that I see that are in a similar space, one of them that I love and I've always found extraordinarily compelling is commentary on like professional gaming,
Right.
or commentary on specifically like live commentators, sports commentators, things like that, because it's taking the inarticulate space of expression that is the sport or the game or something and putting it into articulated forms that the layman can understand, right? And expressing it in different media so that when you watch the big man throw the big thing on the TV, this guy tells you how big he is and why it's interesting that he's throwing the big thing, and you go, oh, I get it now. And that's at the simplest level of somebody who knows more than you explaining to you. And so the endeavor is to become someone who can articulate and someone who knows enough to articulate without causing more harm than good or something like that.
Right.
I
But
love Super Smash Bros. Commentary. I used to be really addicted to League of Legends, and I loved League of Legends commentary. And I particularly love StarCraft 2 commentary.
yeah.
Tastosis, man. That duo, I don't even care about the game, frankly. I'm just there for them talking about the game and their ability to talk about the thing and the ability of the StarCraft commentators in Korea and in other languages as well has sucked so many people into loving the thing that they couldn't have understood either. So it's sort of like teaching. It's magic. It's something awesome.
Right. I
And
will.
then yeah, say ahead. So go ahead.
I will say same thing. Because a lot of people love labels. A lot of people love compartmentalizing people,
Yeah,
even if they don't know where stuff fits. It's like, oh, you're analyzing, you're discussing, you're like able to go ahead and like do so much things.
you're
Are
this.
you an analyzer? Yeah. Oh, but you also do like anime and you talk about video games and books and all of these things. Are you this other thing? And you're also like, mentioning like other, and it's people have a hard time going ahead and like compartmentalizing like, hey, a person can be fluid in the way that they go ahead and like present their medium. So when you try and
Hmm.
shift so hard out of these roles that people have compartmentalized you into,
Oh
it's
yeah,
like a big like rubber band effect where people are like, no, that's
huge.
not the that's not the person that we know. And it's like, wait a minute, like we want to take creative strides. We want to not just stay in one particular label or role that is assigned to
Absolutely.
us,
I'm
right?
experiencing a lot of that right now as I'm in a process of growing in chaos and shifting and sort of
Right.
disassembly to reassemble, and I'm confident in my ability to reassemble into a way that's going to be way better than what was before, and it's already there. Like the people who are into what I'm doing are like, yes, finally, and the people who are just wanting something else are going like, what are you doing, man? This is crazy. You can't do this.
What?
You're going nuts. You can't. You're never gonna do it. You're never gonna make it. And it's like, okay, I might though. I might, and I'll figure that out if I go, but I'll never figure it out if I don't try. And exactly what you said about being fluid is why I'm extracting tea from Teaboo. And
Right.
I think that the flip side is that compartmentalization and labeling and genres I use as the example, partly because I wrote a really good paper on genres once, and I might have to
Right.
rewrite the paper. They're useful. They are useful, and denying their utility is foolish. We need to be able to put things in their place so that we don't have to think about them all the time. We need to know
Right.
that my room is safe, and we need to know that my house is locked, and we need to know that like this book means this, and this media means this, and that thing is this way, and that guy does the reactions, and we need labels for ourselves so that we can articulate how we work in the world, right?
Right.
But labels are always flawed, and they're always flawed because nothing is only one thing. Nothing is only one thing. A pen isn't only even a pen, really. It's also a tool. It's also a knife because I can use it to open a box, or it's a stabbing object. It's all these different things in terms of how it can be used, and so
Which
labels
is
are always failing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is interesting because right now you're hitting on one of the major like developmental milestones I believe Piaget was hitting on, which is people
Mm.
have, especially kids growing up, if you don't meet a developmental milestone, it's hard to separate mom, the role of mom, from the role of your mom being a person and
Oh
being able to go
yeah,
ahead and do things, you know? So it's interesting that people like because people roles have their own like they play up their part in society, right? Like,
totally.
you go out and I love to go ahead and put this out there. We all wear masks, right?
Oh yeah.
We either wear,
Yes, yes,
we wear the
yes.
mask of an entertainer, we wear the mask of a person that's like going out with their significant other, the mask of a sibling, so on and so forth. We're all wearing different masks at different
All
times.
exchanges, all exchanges. You have you seen Avatar: The
But
Last Airbender?
I have seen Avatar: The Last Airbender.
You know the mask creature that tries to steal faces.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
it
yeah.
wants it wants to take away Aang's soul, but it wears all the different masks. That's immediately what I think of as the mask wearing monster in the spirit
But
world.
and through that, I guess the big question is, at what point are you wearing too many masks? And how does it feel to come down to your first mask? At what point can you be yourself in that part?
Mm.
Right?
I
Because
love that you say come down to your first mask because the ego itself or the thing that you view or the persona or the I don't have the exact terms. I don't know which one I'm
right,
looking for. But you know which one I mean. It's a
right.
construction of your consciousness. Your many selves, and those are not just masks but selves themselves. And behind the mask is all of them swarming together. Right? It's a soup. It's a sea.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
the one that you call you is it's you bullshit, like not really, but coming down as close as you can to the bare bones, in a computing
Right.
sense. You look at programs on a GUI that are so many layers extrapolated from the bare bones assembly code, let alone the machine code that's actually running the actual electrons in your system, that you're barely looking at the same thing really. And so you want to get, I think, as close to the bare bones as you can while not getting freaked out by just how complicated you are.
Right.
Something like that.
Right.
How does
Which is
it feel? I don't know. How does it feel to be without masks? I've only been in that state a few times, and I don't know whether this is like kosher to talk about, but one of the times that I've been in that state, or the closest that I've been, has been with the help of psychedelics, and I don't
yeah.
understand how those work necessarily, but I'm fascinated by them because they are like paint thinner stripping away layers of masks and getting
Yeah.
down to the inarticulate. And there's something really interesting there, and obviously there are problems with them. But that's where I've gotten the closest to feeling that way, of being unmasked to myself.
Right. And even through that, it's a sense of vulnerability and control and 101 other emotions out there, which is why I love this whole concept of like we all have different emotions, we all have different experiences,
Hmm.
and no two people are the same, right?
No,
For
no, no.
example, your how you grew up, your attachment, your narrative that you formed up to now. Say we went shopping, right? For some reason, T and Ed went shopping.
Right, right, right.
And this lady almost hits us with their car, right?
Ooh,
For me, I might blow up. I might be like survival instinct turns on from like me growing up, and for you, it's like, oh, it
totally.
was an accident, almost
No
an accident,
worries, no
whatever it is, what
worries.
it is.
Blow it off,
So,
whatever. Versus
so
a full
that's
trauma response, like yeah.
right. Which is what's interesting because like even at the core as to like if we were to leave one mask on, right? The mask that is superfluid by all the consciousness or stream of unconsciousness in general, right?
Hmm.
Is that now affected by all the masks that we have worn after that point? Have we been
Yeah.
able to go ahead and like shape and influence our first original mask to a point where, it's
Hmm.
no longer just pure?
Um.
Because
I
it's a
I
changing
don't know.
environment.
I
Yeah.
don't know. That's a problem that is in at least one direction a step beyond I've articulated. I don't know. I would guess based on mythologies and the way that these things tend to go, I would guess that the answer is to recognize that you're all of the masks all at once and that it's really only ever been one mask and that it's just
Right.
one mask that shifts and swirls and is the you that is far more fluid and flows between masks. It's like you are the thing that flows between states of being, right? And you're the
Right.
thing that remains constant in a soup of change. Your body's cells are dying and being refreshed constantly. You're this growing thing that's moving through the universe, and really what you are is sort of like the process of moving and the process of growing itself. And you're this thing that remains constant between it. So are you even one of the masks or are you the thing that puts on masks? And I think if you can
Well,
start to identify with the thing that puts on masks, that's how you get closer to the self, maybe. And say that all of the masks are you as much as you are them and as much as they are like fake, they're real. And that's like
right.
imposter syndrome, you go into
Yeah.
a position and you're like, oh, this is just a mask and it's fake, but everybody around you is going, no, you're doing the thing, what are you talking about? And the mask
Right.
becomes reality. You push against the wall so hard that you become the wall itself.
Which is sort of what I was going to bring up in my next question, because it's sort of like the problem with DC's ship, like
Oh
if
yeah.
you keep replacing parts of the old ship, with new ones, is the like all the parts that are left over, is that the DC's ship or is the new one DC's ship? And my answer to that is we're fluid, right? We keep
Hmm.
growing and we keep changing in our unconscious as well. The archetypes and everything that we put in there, knowledge, and sometimes I think not having that much knowledge can truly lead to happiness if we're gonna go by for some philosopher's
Oh, I'd buy
standards,
that.
right?
I'd buy that absolutely. Yeah, ignorance is bliss, top to bottom,
Yeah,
and that's indicated in a lot of religious texts and ideas as well. To just not know is great, but it doesn't last. Like you're gonna
it doesn't
find out
last. Yeah,
eventually is the thing. You can only close your eyes and bury your head in the sand for so long because like, well, I love to conceptualize it as dragons. Dragons are great.
sure.
If you just stay in your castle and ignore the dragon just gets bigger, and eventually the
Right,
dragon's going to get big enough to eat your castle, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So you have to be the hero who goes out and gets your armor on, and that's like culture, and gets your sword together, and that's like the ability to parse truth from untruth, and you get your shield, and I don't know what that is exactly. Maybe you don't
right.
have one. Maybe it's just a sword, and I love to ideate the sword as a scissor because of Kill la Kill. And it's two blades, right? Because our brain has the two sides, and it's the what is known and what is unknown. And then you go out and you slice that dragon into pieces and sell the parts for money and claim your treasure. So you can't hide from the problems.
Right. And through that, I think something interesting that's coming up, and this might like future generations. I don't think it's even going to like affect us in our lifetimes, but
Mm.
right now, and I'm a huge proponent of again, media psychology,
Hmm.
artificial intelligence and psychology, and so on and so forth. I think it's that's actually what one of my theses was like being able to like foreseeing the evolution of psychology into using artificial intelligence in future orientations.
Okay.
So for example, right now, I think it's the University of Southern California or the
Mm.
University of Southern Colorado. It's one of the USCs.
Okay. I
Uh,
didn't know there were two. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, they're doing a study in connectomes and replicating and being
Okay.
able to go ahead and transfer connectomes. So like the way
I
that our
don't know what
neurons fire.
a connectome is specifically. Please
Sure.
explain.
So So a connectome is essentially like every choice, every decision that we make, every neural pattern that's been created because of that, all connect in between these neural links. So
Okay.
connectomes are the neural links in between. And right now, what they're doing is essentially mapping out the entire human brain from these connectomes. And the question now is, does human consciousness or unconsciousness, is it
Hmm.
reflected by the patterns of these connectomes? And
Oh,
if we're able to go ahead and transfer
the
these
answer is
connectomes,
obviously yes, but we'll have to actually try as hard as we can to disprove it in order to prove it. So the answer is obviously yes. The structure of the brain is relative to the process of consciousness. There's no disputing it. Like, it's so obvious, but
right?
we'll have to prove it,
But
and
and
I look
that's the
forward to
point.
it.
It's like if we're able to go ahead and like replicate these connectomes inside of a robot hardware, whatever it may be in the future, is that you? And that's
Or
sort of where the
close
question
enough.
itself, or close enough,
Is
right?
that you or close enough? And the answer is maybe. We're gonna. I had hoped we would get here to this in this direction because transhumanism and the future and science and artificial intelligence are
Sure.
near and dear to my heart. And I did end up pursuing computer science, and I did end up pursuing coding and programming and working in certain cutting edge spaces, which I fell out of very quickly because fucking freaky shit is going on in the cutting edge systems design that are running our systems. And I don't feel great about that part of the future in some ways. But books. I
We got
recommend
the
this
book.
book all the time. This is Accelerando by Charles Strauss. I would like you to read it, or at least try to, or try to find a copy and read it. I think you can probably find an audiobook copy that'll be cheaper, or a Kindle copy or something. This is the best thing that I've seen in terms of depicting a potential future. And it all starts with mapping out brains and then
Right.
putting them into computed space, whether that's physically organized in silicon or in silicon. I don't, not silicone, but that's with an E, and that's a different thing.
Yeah, that's
In
the thing there.
no. In silicon, or is done digitally through representations in digital space, which seems more likely to me, a couple layers of extrapolation away. Yeah, it seems like it might work. I
Yeah.
think that the problem is that I think that our brains are actually way more complicated than we have any idea, and so we're gonna copy the underlying structure and be like, we totally did it, and we're not going to realize that down to the smallest quantum level, every part of the articulation of the brain is important for producing the systems that seem to be relative to like firing electrical currents and generating waves of intersecting magnetism or some crazy
Right.
shit. It's way more complicated than I could ever express, and so I believe in science very heavily. I believe that it will take way longer than we think to actually understand the human brain, because I think we're way more complicated than we think we are.
Well, I was about to say, I feel like we're a baby when it comes to even psychology in of itself. If we're gonna get
Yeah,
into that, like it's
yeah.
quite literally out of all the sciences, it's still like a little baby toddler, learning
Oh
how to
my
like walk.
gosh.
When it comes to the brain, we can just say that we barely even peered like the curtain and thought there was an entire like city and everything behind there.
Oh
We
my
haven't even
goodness.
taken a
Yeah.
step in, so there's a lot to go ahead and like look into.
Oh man, I mean, the brain seems endlessly capable of experiencing the universe, and that means that
Yeah,
it's at least as complicated to some extent as parts of the universe around you, and
right,
that's bonker. That's absurd. And then that's not even getting into some of the fundamental questions that we have about the nature of reality, as far as the observation hypothesis and whether things even exist as we experience them, or whether the process of experiencing is what generates the things that exist. And it's by no means obvious that we exist in a world that is as real as we think it is from a
right.
physical perspective. But it is by all means obvious that if you jump off a cliff, you're not going to do so well. And so there are some rules that govern your existence, and at least those are pretty true, and you can learn as much about those as you possibly can. It's like, back to your example of Theseus's ship. Your answer to it, I think, is a perfectly good one. You are in flow. I think the other answer that I would use is, it doesn't matter whether Theseus's ship is Theseus's ship anymore, because it's still a ship and it's still floating. And that's all that really matters in the moment, is that you are not drowning, right? And so it's
Right.
like, I don't understand how my brain works. I don't understand how to create balance in my channel. I don't understand necessarily how to improve in every way, but I know that I can take the next step forward. And if I do that, maybe I'll get forward and maybe I'll get closer to a better way of being.
So since we're on the topic of stumbling forward, moving
Yes.
forward, and trying to find that balance, and I think this might be an interesting way in, which is for those individuals, because oftentimes, again, referencing back our conversation that we had previously, we are looking at other forms of media to try and express some feelings, frustrations, emotions, whatnot.
Yeah.
What message would you give to those people that are, say they watch T daily, that's their one thing, but they're going through a lot in their lives, like,
Um, Yeah, one message to make it all as concise as I can. That's a rough thing to do because conciseness is, I mean, brevity is the soul of wit, and conciseness is
yeah,
fucking hard. You know,
yeah,
we come up with new words to express big concepts, and those create a hurdle because you try to express those in that way, and it's really tempting to do that. So I'll try to be as simple as I can possibly be, and I
sure,
think it's the video that I made for one of my daily brews, and I made it as the title. It's 3 words. It's being is good, even when
yeah,
it fucking sucks is the part of it, because it always sucks. And that's the Taoist idea, and that's the Buddhist idea, and it comes from a lot of religious philosophies. And I'm scared as I keep learning more. I'm scared that we're throwing all of that stuff about how to be and how to interact with each other, and how to handle the fact that there are things in this world that are bad for you and you want them. Like,
right,
how do you even handle that? And I think the answer is to say being is good, but it's also suffering, man. You're gonna hurt. So choose something worth suffering for and go. Like, just go and move toward it in some way. And the thing that I've found over and over is that thinking about the problem doesn't help me solve the problem. Thinking about myself doesn't help me solve myself. Thinking about myself in relation to a goal helps myself come into order, like, immediately.
right,
And so I think about it as pushing up against a wall, because I've been doing that recently, is very literally pushing up against a wall and feeling my physicality form itself into the way that it's supposed to be in order to push effectively on that wall. And I think you can do that in your mind too. Find a goal that's way beyond your capacity, way beyond your possibility to reach, and go, I'm gonna do that. And then try to do it, and
right,
and leap into the unknown and be able to fail. And somebody in my Discord, I had a tough conversation today. They said something really incisive and really important, which is that risk is the privilege of stability, or something along those lines. That you can't risk it all if you're struggling to make ends meet. And my answer to that is, fuck that. Yes, you can. Because you're going to be dying doing this minimum wage job anyway, doing whatever it is that you're doing. You're going to be killing yourself anyway, and it's going to be a slow, painful, drawn-out death. So try starving for a week in order to get to what you want, and pursuing the things you actually find compelling. And maybe it'll work, and maybe it won't,
right,
and you'll go back. But at least you'll have this moment where you're like, at least I tried, and I know
right,
that's not for me. Because otherwise it's going to haunt you for fucking forever. And I keep meeting people. As soon as I came to this idea, I keep meeting and talking to people, especially like cashiers and grocery store clerks, and they've got no light in their eyes, man. I talked to a guy at Bevmo. I went and I quit alcohol a while ago, and
right,
I've reintroduced it into my life as, like, I get one good beer. And so I go to Bevmo, and I spend like 15 minutes walking around thinking about which beer I want, and then I buy one beer for myself, and I take it home, and I enjoy it in a social setting with all of my friends, and it's wonderful. But I went and I checked out, and there's this guy. He's going bald. He's in his mid-30s. He's got some tattoos and some piercings, and he's got these bright blue eyes with no life in them. And just by
yeah,
talking to him and connecting to him, I carry a little notebook around me that has all my cards in it. And he asked me for my ID, and I held it up, and he went, "Whoa, that's really cool. You carry a notebook around? Whoa, what's that pencil?" Because I carry a really good pencil. Immediately he notices the pencil, and I show him the pencil. It's a Statler drafting pencil. And he's like, "That's super cool. I got to get one. I'm an artist." And I look in his eyes, and he's sitting there at the cashier at the Bevmo, and my immediate thought, and I didn't say it out loud, but I almost wish I had.
right,
Was, no, you're not. Because being an artist is a process of doing the art, and you're currently doing the cashiering. So you're a cashier. You want to be an artist, and you should be an artist, but right now you're a cashier. So
right,
go be an artist is where I'm at. Go try it at least. And there's a scene that's one of my favorite scenes in anime. It's in Akagi. Have you seen Akagi?
I have not.
Okay.
Ooh, you can spoil, don't worry.
Akagi's about it's an idealized character who's just like perfectly good at everything. Basically, he's the perfect gambler, and he basically always wins his gambles. And he's compared to Kaiji, which is a story by the same author, who's just an everyman who gets destroyed by the gambling system constantly. But Akagi is brilliant, and one of his first acts is he gets into a game of chicken with another vehicle. And because of the way that it's set up, there's no win scenario for him. And they're driving toward a cliff. And the other guy skids out and is able to brake, but Akagi floors it and goes all the way over the cliff because he knows that if he hesitates at all, the car's going to crash into the rocks just below. But because he goes all the way to the end, to the very bitter end to death, he flies over the rocks and lands in the water. And that doesn't work for everyone, but it sure worked for me, man. And so there's something to it that could work, right? It's like, ooh, that's good. That's good stuff. And I got that from anime, and I wouldn't have been able to articulate it anyway. So there's my spiel. You asked a good goddamn question, and so I gave you an insane answer, and I hope that it made sense.
Which is beautiful. I love when there's a fire in your eyes when a question is asked that you were like, wait a minute, okay, wait a minute,
Yeah.
and that's true. A lot of people, I like to call this process automation, right? A lot of people, we go through our daily routine. We get up in the morning, go to the restroom, take a shower, so on and so forth. Routinization is
a more specific term. Yeah. Perfect.
And people are just going through it, and they don't have knowledge. For example, if you ask a person when they're driving, they've disassociated from the moment they woke up to the moment they get to work. And it's like, wait a minute, then where is the you that finds excitement when you go home and you turn on a video game and you're playing it? Where is the you that, like, hey, you're with your partner and you're feeling all sorts of ways?
Mm-hmm.
Where's all that life, all that enjoyment? And it's often because we feel trapped. People feel trapped in their day-to-days. Yeah. They're afraid of stepping into the unknown, because that's a big risk. It's scary if I open.
There are dragons out there. There are dragons out there. Well, all you have to do is wait until it's dark outside, turn off all the lights in one room, and turn on the lights in the hallway outside, and then just stick your hand into the dark room. And just wait to imagine what horrible monsters are gonna come and grab your hand. That's the unknown. It's the dark. It's the impossible. But it's also the unknown is the place of change. The uncertain is the place where you can choose to lock things in. And if my weird hypotheses are correct and humans are far beyond complicated quantum computers and we actually are capable of locking reality into different ways, and we are, because we're waterbenders, firebenders, earthbenders, and airbenders, we control the elements, and you are capable of it. You can manipulate matter around yourself to create change. It's bonkers. Then maybe the unknown is the place where you need to thrive. Like that's the place where you have to go, and where we all have to go. And maybe it's actually what we're best at.
And and here's the scary part. And I hate to scare the audiences with this, but guys, the unknown, that door will keep opening. Even if you have it closed, time is going to keep putting pressure on that door, and unknown elements are going to start to come in. Like it or not. It's up to you to how you prepare for it, But referencing that question back, I guess the one thing that I love to go and say, it's okay to not be okay. Right?
Totally.
If I were to give a message to anybody, and it's okay to not be okay. And any form of self-care is self-care, even destructive forms of self-care.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah. Okay.
Because there seems to be a lot of, like, for example, stigmas, a lot of shaming, even from the mental health perspective, onto people who all they know as to how to take care of themselves. Like, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, the only thing that there are is like working week by week, trying to secure their home. And for them, like, that week by week job, they come home and they drink and they fall asleep and they repeat the process, because to them, that's how they're able to maintain that stability. It's like, hey, if that's all you got and that is your form of self-care, that's their form of self-care. Me criticizing, or any person criticizing that, is that helping at all? No,
not even a little bit. No.
And with that, I applaud people who, if you wake up in the morning, I know it sounds fucking silly as heck. Like, there's a random man out there in the internet saying this, but I'm proud of you. You woke up today.
Yeah, dude. Waking up is not that fucking easy, actually.
It's not.
Let's be honest. How everyone who's here knows that it's not that easy to wake up. because
Right.
it's hard. It's actually hard. I've actually struggled with it, and I've figured out ways to fix it that have worked for me,
Right.
which is amazing. But like, gosh, it's hard.
And there are a lot of people, and by this I mean, like, I've struggled with depression myself. I've
Mhm.
struggled with forms of anxiety and so on and so forth. And it's a hard process. And that's why it's like, never downplay even the smallest successes, right? If you woke up in the morning and you
Totally.
did your bed, hey, you woke up in the morning, you did your bed, and you at least know if you're gonna come back, you're gonna come back to your bed. If you didn't make your bed, hey, you at least woke up today. Because there are people out there who literally their depression kicks their butt so much that they stay asleep 2, 3 days even,
Oh yeah,
up to
just
the point
land,
where they're,
just land.
yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah,
becoming blob, become nothing,
yeah,
because the world is hard, and it squeezes you. The
yeah,
world really sometimes feels like it wraps itself around you like a constrictor snake and squeezes until you're just goop, and you just want to be goop and putty and lay down and say fuck it. But that's the thing that I keep coming to as an idea, is that the more you run away, the worse it gets. And the more you move
right,
toward it, the stronger you get in relation to it. And we know that because of exposure therapy to fear,
right,
and exposure therapy to in almost everything, like anything that's going wrong. If you get closer to it, usually it gets better. It's weird, right? If you
yeah.
find the part that hurts and you push on it, at some point it's going to hurt too much for you to bear. And if you push a little bit harder than that, it's going to be gone, and you're going to fix it. It's so strange, but it works.
But but through that, it's also like, hey, don't be afraid to take that step. And
Yeah.
even if you're like, hey, I can't do that, that's way too scary right now. What
Mhm.
is your goal, and what is one small step that you can start taking to reach that goal?
1%. It's the
Yeah,
James Clear thing. It's
yeah,
could you take one photo every day, right? Because if you do that
yeah,
every day for a year, you've got 365 photos more than you would have taken ever, right? If you sit down and you write not one page but one word of your book, and let's be real, every time you write one word, you're going to write more than that. But just make it
right.
easy. One day I sit down and I write one word of my book. You're going to have a book eventually, and you wouldn't have
Right.
had one otherwise. So what's the 1% thing you could do? I was thinking about this in relation to like cleaning your space or cleaning your desk. And I've got this theory. So here's another thing that I don't know
Sure.
if it's kosher. How do you feel about talking about people who are deeply and heavily canceled?
Let's talk about it. Let's go.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
we can talk about
Okay.
anything. I'm open for anything, bro.
Fantastic. There's a man who I think is heavily canceled, and by saying his name, I'm gonna color the entirety of this podcast, which is super
Uh-huh.
unfortunate. But a lot of the ideas that I've gotten because he went to other people who had these ideas: Piaget, Jung, Nietzsche, Solzhenitsyn, and he compiled them and put them into an articulated form that I understood.
Right.
I don't have any judgment on the cancellation part. I do have the judgment
Right.
on the product of this book, which is Maps of Meaning by Jordan B. Peterson,
Right.
and is a really cool Jungian look at a bunch of stuff. But oh shit, I lost my train of thought because I was thinking about cancel stuff. God damn it! No, no,
Well,
no, no.
I'll just jump in real quick
Yeah,
and say,
go,
I think it's important to go ahead and separate out the person from their work, because their
please.
work can be absolutely phenomenal, and like they could have
Yeah.
made like strides and advances. The person, you can have your own opinions as to whoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good, bad, whatever they are. But if they're actually like able to go ahead and compile a lot of information, a lot of work, and expand the field,
Mm-hmm.
that's worth more than like pretty much
Way
anything
more
else.
to me.
Yeah,
Way more to me.
yeah,
Like it's like if a monster, if the worst person you could possibly imagine had invented penicillin, would you throw away penicillin? No, that would be
right,
ridiculous, right? It would be ridiculous. You'd be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So what he basically argues is that myths matter, and that looking at art gives us a fundamental comprehension of the way to be in the world because it lets us see from other perspectives, is the basis of the argument that I've experienced from it. At least it's multi-layered, and so that's a gross paraphrasing. Obviously it's a big book,
right.
but that's the core idea that's in there. I forgot where I was specifically going to go with that before that. Do you recall where I was headed before I brought up his name? Because I had a thought and I didn't say it effectively.
I don't recall, me. I'm
Shoot.
sorry. I usually keep good track in my brain as to where
Yeah.
positions are, but not this time.
Shoot. Dang. Ding dang unfortunate. We've been going all over the place, so that's solidly unfortunate. Um
I was about to say, but that's how you know that we have a lot of different points that like we want to
mm,
extrapolate on, right? That
Hmm.
we're hitting a different dimension, and we're like, whoa, all right, hold
Oh
on,
yeah, we're
expand a
we're
little
in
bit
we're
more.
in fifth dimensional jumping around shit here, absolutely. Well, that's the
But
thing, we've taken thought and we've gone to the next level, because
right,
the greatest forms of thought are like speech and writing, and then the next level transcendent form of thought and is speaking with another person, and
exactly,
and to do that and to get the expression back and forth is well, it's revelatory, it's very powerful. um,
right,
I'm the most complicated thing that I can ever come anywhere near understanding, and you're, as far as I can tell, if we take the presupposition that not each of us is an NPC and each of us actually has like a conscious entity within them that
alive,
is
yeah,
transcendent and powerful, like if we take that as a presupposition and we don't think that everybody else in the universe is just a robot, which I think is
right,
important to actually actively say, then interfacing with you as another element of the most complicated system that ever existed in any way, shape, or form is like the most complicated and interesting thing that I could possibly do with my time. So it's
right.
fun. It's fun. It's
Yeah,
really
dude, it's
cool.
great. So one thing that well, you see, I'm telling you, we're jumping back and forth here, which is
Yeah.
the beauty of it. And also, yeah, one thing I did want to go ahead and add on to that, which is like the fact that like when you make a connection, a lot of people like seem to downplay connections. It's
Mm,
huge
mm,
because like the amount of time that you like, you take to like someone, be able to form that connection, be able to go ahead and like expand on ideas, expand on philosophies, expand on just even sometimes verbal diarrhea, whatever comes out, right?
sure.
It is so impeccably important that I even think like our communication that we're having today, like interfacing, being able to go ahead and talk like this, it's like a once in like how I forgot the actual percentage. It's like the idea of us being able to connect is like so ridiculously small yet so ridiculously important because everyone has
Absolutely.
meaning and those thoughts and words and sentences and everything that we're throwing out there have meaning as well. So the question I was going to ask you is
Go for it.
this: how does it feel? I'm not gonna. I'm no scratch that. I'm not gonna use any psychological terms here for
How
like.
do you
So I'm not
feel
gonna.
about how do you
Yeah.
feel
How
about
does that
that?
make you feel? No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. But genuinely, like when it comes to a lot of individuals, our attachments tend to influence our life. It tends to influence our
Absolutely.
moods, everything. So for you, how does it feel? And I said it. How does it
Go
feel
go. Yeah, go
for
ahead.
the others see you as like either their only form of secure attachment when it comes to your videos, your content?
Ooh. Yeah, so that's definitely tough. I haven't had any like scary incidences of parasocial relationships, really, or anybody who's actively expressed being close to me in a way that made me uncomfortable or crossed boundaries. So at least
Right.
I'll just say that we can limit the discussion on that front, because I just don't have any experience with it. Um, it makes me feel sad that they don't have those attachments in the real world, and it makes me feel driven to make the attachment that they have to me as like helpful as possible for what they're looking for, and also for what they're not looking for but need,
Right.
because a lot of the time they're actively seeking just the entertainment or actively seeking just the escape, but what they need is a shift in perspective, or a little, or one of those little revelation moments, or to click and go, oh, I love that character because he's fighting against bad things and I wish I could do that. It's like the simplest things sometimes when you express them can impact people in fascinating ways. And so when I see that sort of attachment to me, I want to turn it into something. There's power in it.
Right.
And I see, and I don't mean this to be judgmental, but I do mean it to be judgmental. I see a lot of people using the attachments that other people, people who are in influencers or other things, using those attachments in order to manipulate people for their own ends and their own profit. And I see them using them to direct them to sponsors, and using it to get them to become essentially a cult of personality around the person, and turn that cult into a money making, profit hungry machine. And I don't love that. So my goal is to treat the people who are becoming attached to me with the respect that if they had gotten that respect from the people that they wanted to be attached to in the real world, they might not have those problems with attachment in the first place. Something
Right.
something like that. Something like that. I don't know.
Because there's a really good book, I guess a series of two books out there for people that are wondering, wait a minute, why are you asking this question? So one of my areas of focus is attachment psychology, right?
Okay.
And like narrative driven attachment psychology. So
Cool.
with that, like for example, the book is called Angels in the Nurseries and Ghosts in the Nurseries, right?
Okay.
And they go over how essentially, when our caregivers, people that we love, especially growing up, weren't there, how they start
So I
impacting.
just immediately want to say immediately, because angels evokes demons or devils, you immediately expect that switch, and it's angels and ghosts because it's just the goneness, right? It's
Yeah.
just the yep, there you go. Bingo bango. Please continue. I just wanted to clickety clack.
Yeah. So it essentially goes really deep into like, different both case studies and people out there, like their personal driven experiences as to like, what, like having people there affected me in this pattern as opposed to not. And then when my parents weren't there, I started finding out that it was fight or flight, freeze or
Mm-hmm.
fawn immediately. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I grew up. And you know what? Being in a situation where you're an adult and that's the only thing does that mean that like all of my thoughts and my actions are, I don't know how to put it, like wrong when that's the form that I grew up in, and they start making you question a
Yeah.
lot of stuff like that. Like, whoa, wait a minute. So when it comes to secure attachments, and this is why I'm bringing it up, right? A lot of people, because in some way, shape, or form, we've all gone through a heartbreak. We've all gone through either a friend break or something like that.
True.
Um, your words, our words, the way that we phrase things, our moods, even sometimes if we have a bad
Mm.
mood or something, people are like, "Whoa, you okay? You doing good?"
Totally.
Start affecting those people out there, and they'll latch on. And that's sort of where the parataxic distortions come in. That
Got
pedestal
it.
work,
Got it. Got it.
and that's where even I think one of the most dangerous things out there is people who throw money right and support, as you mentioned, like people build a cult of personality, and thinking that by supporting you, they can change your content or
There,
maintain the content
yeah,
you're doing.
yeah. That was something that I had to iron out very explicitly in the very beginnings of the channel. Was like, what is the boundary around what you get for paying me, and what are you actually paying me for? And I'm very specific about the way that my business is structured. And I talked about it quite a bit in the Discord discussion that I had. In fact, let me pull that up because I think it'll be
Yeah, please.
enlightening to speak directly to it. We were talking about early access because my primary funding source is early access to the content. And the way that I view
Right.
that is I'm basically exploiting the immediacy problem that we have in psychology, the marshmallow test, right? The kid inside of you who isn't able to restrain yourself. You need the next episode immediately. And it seems like the safest part of your psychology to exploit. I'm going to exploit something. I have to make
Right.
money. And I'm not entirely convinced yet that taking away all paywalls will lead me to a place where I can support myself financially. And maybe that's a cliff that I need to drive all the way off of and see if I just make everything free, can I survive? And I don't know. So I'm worried about doing that. But
Let me chime in real quick
yeah, yeah, yeah.
before we go on there, because I think this is an important element right there, right? It's like right now, this is how you're surviving. This is your form of life, so
Yes.
on and so forth, which is a huge risk to even like go into that.
Mm-hmm.
And often, I guess this will clear up a misconception. People have this misconception that by putting out the YouTube videos, you're making like bank, like Mr.
Oh
Beast
no.
money, no matter what. And it's like, no,
No,
like
not at
not at
all.
all. And even through that, I guess I'll clarify this in like for anyone that was curious. I think 99% of all my YouTube videos are all unmonetized.
Yeah,
So people that come in and they have this idea that like, oh, you know what, like, oh, they're pre-watching content, they're doing stuff. And first off, we're not.
sure.
In case you're wondering about me, it's like chat gets to decide. Whenever I do
Yeah,
something on Twitch, and we have like 50 anime going all at once, and they get to decide at random what anime we're analyzing, what anime we're doing, and
absolutely.
all of it's unmonetized on YouTube because, as I mentioned before, hey, everything I'm throwing out there is for the sake of like expanding mental health, expanding the thoughts of like, self-care, or expanding like different elements of maybe introspection for people that need it.
Yeah,
So,
I super agree. Also, I will say as well. I've had the capacity to go and monetize my channel since years ago. I have never
right.
monetized a single video because I don't want a damn dime of advertising money. I have serious moral compunctions about the parasitic nature of advertisement, and it's why I'm moving. I had started doing Instagram, and I'm completely going to cut off the Meta ecosystem because I
Uh-huh.
think that Facebook Meta is like super broken. It's just a
Right.
bad system, and like a bad system to the point where I would put the big evil word on the system as like
Uh-huh.
that thing causes harm to people in like a malicious
Right.
and harmful way. But I don't want no advertising money. And then there's something else to that, which is that the content that we make, if we're doing it right, is fair use. It
It is.
is. It is fundamentally fair use. It is the fairest and most educational and most evaluative and interesting use of content. However, it is also using the hard-earned or hard work of great artists in order to support ourselves, and we do stand on their shoulders. And so to monetize the views upon them directly when I know that that's a part of the draw feels like a hard no to me. It's just like that seems wrong.
Right.
But there are all of these layers of how do you run, how do you even create art effectively and ethically, and in a way that goes on into the future. So somebody in my channel said, early access, in my opinion, is more about supporting the artist than anything else, especially the way you handle content. It is stuff that would be released anyway. It's just that those who do support get it today instead of next week. And I responded, I don't know about that. I do it as absolutely honestly as I can, but it is still a barrier to entry and a form of exploitation. I'm exploiting the tendency of people to want something now instead of later. So you could say that I'm exploiting the like fear of missing out, and also the fear of
Right.
missing out around discussion, which is important and useful. But the response that I got was, I have never felt exploited by it. Instead of looking at it as a way, as someone who hates standard reaction content, so there's the emoji reactor idea, to instead I look at it as a way to encourage more of the content that I enjoy. And so my response to that is, well, then some of the ideas that I have about how a person should be working individually within a technological world seem to be functioning, because I've built my business and structured my Patreon in this particular way in order to produce the exact result where you don't feel exploited when you pay me for whatever it is that you're paying me for. So something I've got figured out, which is something I'm creating some level of value in the content itself, which is amazing to realize that that's possible. And then something about the way that I'm exchanging with society for my own survival based on the value that I produce has been figured out effectively as well. And it's like, well, could we take that and externalize it and like extrapolate it out to more people and build parts of systems that make things better for people, where they can pursue their dreams in a way that's effective? And I think things like Patreon really have changed the world in that sense. But I don't know how to make the people who have all this water in front of them, I can lead those horses to water, but I can't make them drink.
You can drink. Yep.
You can't do it. And that makes me ask, have you seen the Monogatari series?
I have. I just finished Bake and the first movie. I haven't seen the entire
Fantastic.
series.
Okay, so I won't try to spoil anything. I'll just ask the phrase, has the phrase "people can't save themselves" come up yet?
I believe so.
I believe it has. That's a core process. Like Araragi as a character, I view as he's a self-insert character, and he's got all these people that he meets, and they've got all these problems, and he tries to save them, and he can't. He can just be there for them. Essentially, they have to save themselves, and that's a good way of being.
You know, I was gonna say, and that's also like a big thing in psychology in of itself. We can, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And when it comes to therapy and advancing psychologically or trying to go ahead and understand yourself, you can open the doors for change yourself.
Yeah, you gotta want it.
Yeah, but I called him Ara-Ara-kun because I always had trouble saying Araragi. See, I'm even struggling now.
Araragi. Yeah.
Yeah. So with him specifically, I think it's always interesting that like everyone had their own situations going on. And at first, it's like that. Oh, you know what? I gotta be there. I gotta be this like savior. I gotta go ahead and do this thing. But the best thing he could do is be there for himself and just be there for them when they needed it. And that's ultimately what enabled that change.
Yeah, and to like learn to respect them better a little bit, and to in a lot of ways to view them as people, because a lot of his interactions are with women. In fact, most of them, almost all of them, and viewing them as objects caused a bunch of problems for Araragi, and viewing them as people let him be there for them at least, and not cause it to get worse.
So okay, perfect. So now that we're on this, right, I kind of want to jump into our good friend Rudy. What episode are you on? I make sure that we establish.
Boy, let me specifically check what episode I rendered last. I think I'm through 14.
Okay, beautiful. So through 14, right? Here's a concept for you, or a genuine question for you. And this is a question that I had throughout the entire series, which is, if Rudy, Earth Rudius, right, before he was isekai'd,
40-year-old fucked up kid. Yeah.
If he was actually, say, a hot Mr. Gray, whatever, do you think that there would have been as many people vocally disturbed about the content as there is now because of that transition? that concept of
Okay.
self.
So if he'd been like a hottie who got lots of girls in the real world, and then he got isekai'd and was like acting pervy, how would people interact with it? So it's because
Yeah.
So you're saying just because of the coloration of him as a pervert in the previous world, people view him as a pervert in the next one,
So,
or
so not
might.
not just that,
Yeah.
I like because I think those first couple of episodes really dug in deep, specifically towards like even like reflecting now. I like haven't seen the series in a good while. I'm
Yeah.
like those first couple of episodes specifically when it comes to that change, it reflected really beautifully, even in societal standards. Guess what? You see, we don't even have to go that far. I'm just gonna put it straight up. You see a really hot guy with a bunch of girls around him. Wow, he must be lucky. You see someone that might be a little bit obese, not the greatest looking dude out there with a lot of women. It's like, what is that guy doing with them?
Mm-hmm.
Ill. There's all these like internal thoughts, like even stigmas that
Mm-hmm.
start coming up.
And
So,
another thing that comes up is you look at that guy and you don't usually go, that guy must have something figured out, right,
right.
about women, which is often the case. I know a number of men who are not traditionally attractive who do very well with women. It's because mostly, from what I can tell, they figured out who they are, and they figured out that other people are people, and so they treat women
Confident.
like they're people, huh?
Yeah. I'm
I
like
didn't. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
confident in respecting boundaries. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Just being able to do that. It's like maybe they figured something out, but that's not where your brain goes. Your brain goes, they're rich and all those girls are gold diggers, or like something stupid
Yeah.
like that. It's like,
Yeah.
no, they must have it wrong. That's what it is. Which is sort of silly and ridiculous. Okay, well, I think the first couple episodes of Mushoku do explore exactly that idea. In the characterization, and I'm not far enough to know what he has done, but in the characterization of Paul. Because Paul,
Sure.
Rudy's father, is a handsome boyo, and he gets away continuously, as far as I know, with sexual assault and abuse and like, I mean, he cheats on his wife,
Bruh.
ding 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 ding, all of these things,
Yeah.
right? And so he's everybody's like, oh, that scallywag Paul who goes around being a rapist a little bit. Oh, but he's handsome and cute, so who cares? And then you get Rudius or Earthius, who essentially hasn't hurt anybody specifically, as far as I know and as far as I can tell. He's hurt himself a lot, and he's put a lot of burden on his family, and those things are not good, right? Like, we look at Earthius, and the way that I've characterized it is like, that's Rifujin's view of what society views as the worst type of person.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't contribute anything. He's actively heading in the direction of paraphilias toward and pathologies toward children, and really fucking with the things that are pure and good in the world. And nobody wants him around, and you don't want him around, and you don't want him to have a new life. You don't want anything good about him. And so, because he's that worst person, he's Jungian, the archetype of the worst, right? He's the hikikomori, he's a pedophile, he's a lolicon, he's all of these things. And so he is your shadow. He's all of the things that you don't like about yourself. And he dies. He makes a weird choice and he dies. And we just eat it up like it's candy, like it makes perfect sense, because we're so inured to the idea of isekai now. But the fundamental nature of isekai stories is like, oh, there's this person and then they die and a new beginning occurs, is exactly
Right.
what I wrote down earlier, which was what you said, that people are terrified of, like, or that the door to change is going to keep opening and the door to chaos is going to keep opening.
Exactly.
Because change is itself the exact same thing as the unknown. Because when you change, you don't know what you're going to change into, and you have to let go of the entire self in order to do it, and that's dying. It really is. Even in the littlest sense, if you change your sleep schedule, the person, the mask that was you that had a poor sleep schedule has to die. And you like
Right.
being that person because it's easy and easy. If you change your diet, the person that was you who ate poorly has to die, or who didn't care about what
Right.
they ate has to die. And so change is the unknown, is fear, and is pain, and you have to get yourself in position and get ready and move into it. All right, that's my
Right.
piece.
Well, with that, and I think it's always interesting because even exploring the concepts, exploring the archetypes, even exploring attachments in of itself, you start seeing a character that has been failed from the very beginning, a
Oh yeah.
character, who has a lot of trauma, and yet we can look around and be like, hey, where's the support structure? And
Totally.
sadly enough, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's just a show. Guys, when we're looking at stuff like this, it relates a lot, especially to like, other outside people, because this stuff is happening all the time.
Oh,
Not
it's a
being
show, but
isekai,
it's
but
reality,
like,
man.
yeah, not
It's a
being
show,
isekai,
but
but like,
it's reality. I mean,
yeah,
my email address for Tiabu for this YouTube channel is hikikomori@gmail.com, Moari. And the reason was because I was essentially living as a hiki at the time, and have a couple of times in my life just lived completely alone, talk to no one, don't go outside, stay inside. I'm on the computer. That's all I'm doing. And anime
right,
was the thing that saved me in those times, right? Because
right,
media was the thing that I gravitated toward, and I found answers in the depths of that despair. And truly, I found answers in Devilman Crybaby, and
sure,
Devilman Crybaby is an archetypal Jungian story. It's man and shadow. It's you having empathy while being the thing that can cause harm, and using
right,
that in order to try and change the world, and failing because you're gonna fail because the world's bigger than
right,
you. And it's just it blew my mind, and it made me destroy myself. It made me shatter. And that's a great archetype too. We have the character who like punches a mirror and it shatters, and they become something else because they've gone off the deep end. And I put myself back together, and I chose to do this, and I chose to investigate the media that had given me some value and talk about it, and
right.
hopefully share it with other people. But
But
yeah, you're not just watching a story, not in any way. And it's in no way self-evident that when you're sitting vegging out and or getting excited about things that are going on with characters, it's by no means self-evident what part of your brain is working while that's
right,
happening. Because I think it's the whole unconscious going, yeah, new dreams, man,
taking
new
it in,
dreams.
yeah.
New dreams. Give me myths. Give me ways of seeing the
Oh,
world. Nom, nom,
but
nom, nom, nom.
and this is what I'll throw out there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It is honestly amazing, and I honestly wish more psychologists, more therapists, more people in the mental health field and other fields started actually taking anime video games as a medium seriously.
Super
Because
seriously.
these shows, at least that like how I found it, I can talk with the kid and be like, hey, like I'll give you an example of a therapy session without breaking HIPAA.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Like, so we're in session. The kid's like, you know what? I started watching a show recently. Cool. What show did you start watching? And they're like, oh, I started watching Naruto. I'm just using Naruto
Hey,
as an
there you go.
example. And they're like,
Awesome.
and I'm really relating to Gara.
Okay.
Boom. Guess what? Therapeutically, I already know where this kid's coming
Yeah,
from. I
flash
can
of an
already,
archetype, all of this like pressure from society to be the best, and pressure from the
yeah.
self to be the best. It's like, oh, I understand this kid immediately, or at least a
And we can
chunk
go
of
ahead.
him. Oh,
Right. And like, you can start asking, okay, so what does, and I'm like, what season we're at? Are you like Naruto or are you like Naruto Shippuden or Boruto, I guess? And you
mm-hmm.
start asking these questions like, what would it take from you to go from like Gara and like, without any friends, with all these like expectations and whatnot to like Gara and Naruto Shippuden where he's a Hokage? And all of a sudden the kid's like eyes like light up and he's like, you understand me. You're talking the same language as
That's the
I
problem that
am.
I've been trying to solve for years. Oh,
Yeah.
sensei, teach me, teach me. Absolutely, man, absolutely.
And I've even had a kid, and this was quite recently, bring up, and he's like, I feel like at times I am Rudius. And like, it blew my mind, right? Being able to go ahead and have conversations with kids, adults, because a lot of adults now, guess what? That's the medium that they grew up with, Dragon Ball Z, anime,
Absolutely.
Evangelion, and so on and so forth. And being able to go ahead and use that as a frame of reference to help
Yeah.
them in their mental health journey. And being able to be
Yes.
like, this is how we grow. The Last of Us, phenomenal for talking about like loss, grief, so on and so
Fantastic.
forth in
Okay,
different games. Yeah,
I've got so many things to talk about off of that. That's
sure.
too. It's you went too dense because you brought in like basically you can connect to people through the things and use them as a reference point. So that's exactly it. I think is that there's a mirror there, and you see the parts of
Right,
yourself that you couldn't see because when you're watching it in animation, you're able to step out from it. And I think it's even better than live action film, because live action film, that's a literal person and you're programmed to be able to figure out that that's somebody other than you. When it's just a
right,
blob of color, it's you. It's really you, and you're able to like blur your eyes and be like, no, but I am that character really, and I am on this journey really. And it's that like stepping outside of yourself. So I think our process of fantasization, our process of imagining, is our most potent tool. And I think
Right.
what we're doing is we're manifesting as close as we can to a perfect simulation of reality and saying, what would happen if I did XYZ, right? Like, if you can imagine a world where you get up at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, and you can imagine a world where you stay in bed all morning, and you can make the conscious choice which world you're going to live in, right? You go into you observe uncertainty, and then you lock it in, and then you do it in action. But you don't
Right.
a lot of actions kill you. And a lot of actions cause problems. And so the ability to evaluate actions in the future and choose which to do in a fantasy world that is not happening in reality is, I think, consciousness, actually. I think it's like the core of it. It's the ability to say, if I were to do this or I were to do this, what would it be? And it's the great chooser, the great uncertainty to certainty limiting factor, or something like that. So when you watch a piece of media, you're watching a fantasy that is another way of being that you haven't thought of yet, and you get to try it on, and try it on in a safe way, and see in story the manifestations of what the author thinks will happen if you act out that way of being. Like Naruto points at the greatest goal. He says, I want to be the greatest man in the world, right? And then he tries to do it. And what his whole story is, what will happen to you in the author's perspective if you try to do that. Rudius's whole story is reawakening and going, I'm going to do good in this time. I'm going to try. And then the author is trying to write out what will happen if you try. And the world manifests around him. He finds out that he's actually good at magic. And he finds out that girls are actually okay with being around him. And his family can work. And all these things can work just because he tried it on. And so you get to try it on yourself in that story, especially if you identify with the bad person that Rudius Earthdius really is. So you get to see his transition. All right, I'm done.
Work through those issues, which is fucking phenomenal. Like, this is me just throwing it out there, and I love that you're going so in depth with it, because it's true. And one of the big things that I always love throwing out there is, like, in an anime medium, we can always choose, or cartoon medium, choose different masks, different roles that we could put ourselves into and play, which brings up the next big thing. I think we're homo ludens. We're individuals that play. We learn through play.
Okay.
We learn through observance and stuff like this, which is why it's wonderful also when it comes to video game formats, which is like, hey, we're put in a scenario where our decisions to do certain things start impacting future stuff. And this is where guilt, this is where all these emotions start getting pulled out of you, because in certain games, and especially even in D&D, D&D is, I love using D&D as a therapy technique, or
it's
as a like therapeutic. You can make up whatever character you want, but
it'll always be a reflection of you, man.
It'll be a reflection of you.
It's no matter what, it's a part of you that you don't want to admit every damn time. Well, I spent some time really thinking about my D&D characters, because we had a break, my party, and really thinking about them in reflection, as reflections of the characters themselves, or the players themselves. And I realized that they don't think that they're reflections of them. One of our friends is the least articulate in terms of simplicity. I don't think he's stupid, but a lot of people think he's stupid, and he's just missing some pieces, and it's partly because of attachment stuff that happened in his youth. Split family, never saw the interest in learning, thought from a very early age that he incorporated the idea that he was dyslexic, and I actually don't think he is, but he seemed to use that as a crutch and excuse to avoid ever reading. And I've gotten him reading, and I've gotten him learning and stuff, and he's really getting to grow and like become a person. It's like amazing, and it's catalyzing at exactly the right time, because he has a son now, and his son is 2, and we're going between 2 and 4, and like I've started learning about how crucial this stage is, and like if I didn't help this guy get some shit together immediately, it was going to ruin that kid's life, and I was really scared of that. But he's coming together, and his character is exactly a reflection of him. He's a total womanizer paladin, dex paladin elf boy with long flowing hair, who's just utterly vain and narcissistic and idiotic, and has an intelligence of 8. And he's like, why is my character this way? I don't know if I identify. And he talked to me the night before we played. He was like, man, I don't even know if I know how to play my character anymore. I feel like so much has changed, and so much of me has changed. And over the course of our session, he started like, hey, can I like reach out and like really make a connection to my goddess instead of just trying to go and fuck girls? Can I like try and do something here? Can I explore this in a different way? And it's like, those are the articulations or the inarticulations, I don't know, of the way that he's been changing as a person, and watching it happen through play and as you said, homo ludens, through the ability to try on different things and try different opportunities was just gorgeous, just extraordinary.
It is so beautiful to see like people actively thinking, right? And actively being like, oh, wait a minute, what if I do this? Does this change this outcome in the future? You'll also get people that were going to question you as the DM for every single. Is that a trap? Is
Oh
that a
yeah.
trap?
Oh
Is
yeah.
that a trap?
Yeah.
But aside from that, people literally taking that journey, that self journey through imagination, through play, because that's what D&D is. It's using our imagination and coming together and forging these amazing stories. And seeing that change happen, that moment where their eyes light up and they have that like serendipitous, just wait a minute. Okay, I see where this is affecting, or people.
Wait, I can do that? Like it's
What?
the moment it's the moment of like, wait, I can actually try that and see if it will work, but the rules don't say that I could do that. I don't have a spell on my list that says that I could do the thing. What do you mean that I could try something crazy and just you'll let me make a roll for it? It's like, no, I'll do it. I'll go. Yeah, sure. The rules are something that you write, man. Come on. No, it's so sick.
Or even further, because this is what really impacted me was I tend to do it with teens, because teens is one of the most critical periods for them to start learning a lot about growth, going through like, what loss is, experiencing a lot of themes and
Hell
concepts
yeah.
that, they might not be ready for yet, or they might already have gone through and have to go ahead and like start taking those steps forward. And seeing kids, all of them start empathizing, coming in at first, a bunch of like little thugs, 14, 15-year-olds, and
Yeah.
like being like, yeah, I will never play D&D. And then by the end, all of them crying and being like, this has been a
Oh,
life-changing experience.
my team, my party are
Yeah.
the best. We're the goofy goobers who kill zombies are the coolest people ever. We need to make t-shirts. It's like, oh my god, what happened there, right? It's like
Right.
you formed a tribe of people and you built a family against chaos and against danger, and you had to experience stuff together and you bonded, and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
And it's the forced socialization that occurs in D&D because you have to be with other people, and if you want to reach your goals, you're gonna have to work together, because everybody just doing their own thing in D&D is gonna lead to everybody dying, pretty much.
Well, you have to be open to facing a lot of situations for that. Again, that concept of being uncomfortable comes in. That
Yes.
concept of like the dark space comes in.
Yeah.
Yep.
And choosing your pain. I think that's something that I'm missing from this whole thing is it's really a Buddhist core concept, and I'm fascinated by Buddhism, and I have been fascinated by Zen for a long time before I even articulated why. But the idea is that desire is or suffering is everything, right? It's inevitable. Right. And what I've found over and over is that the thing that makes the world worthwhile is choosing what's worth suffering for. Because you're gonna hurt about the same amount if you're alone or if you're with people. Choose which one you want, and then dedicate yourself to it and suffer for it. If you want to choose the suffering of being alone, I think that's actually worth suffering, but go for it. And I think that, people are social, literally animals, and we die if we're alone, but you can try as best you can and come back when you're satisfied. But, if you choose the suffering of restraint when it comes to food, that's a different suffering than the suffering that you will 100% experience of your body not liking you very much as you age because you haven't been treating it very well. If you choose whatever suffering you choose, just be willing to take responsibility for those choices and step into the unknown and into the storm and into the rain and into the chaos and the lightning, and that seems to make it worth it. That seems to make it okay.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's so empowering for people to, I'm sure that for some people out there, it's going to be like, well, wait a minute, you're hitting on everything. And for some people, it's like, wait, what? You have to socialize, change. Hey, time and change. The only thing that change is constant. And that's honestly probably the biggest enemy of our times is change, because you're going to keep changing along with the times. And with that, I did want to go ahead and ask you. Oh, there you go. There you go.
That's the reason it's called Accelerando, is because the idea that it presents is not only are you going to have to change along with the times, but the times will continuously change faster. It's accelerating. The more connected we are, the smarter, the faster the world is thinking, and the faster things are flowing, and the faster the change is occurring. The better our hammers get, the better hammers we can build, and so the better our computers get, the better computers we can build. And oh boy, it's gonna go really fast, like faster than our brains are made to keep up.
Right. Yeah.
It's a lot.
One thing I do want to jump in with that as
Yeah.
well is say Paul Ekman's Emotions Revealed. If you ever have the opportunity to, if you want to learn a little bit more about like why we feel certain things, why emotions are categorized throughout different cultures, societies, and why certain things mean certain, like
Ooh,
a
baby.
smile, a smile in a certain culture can mean something completely different in another, and how we express, and 101 things out there. It is a phenomenal book to have in case you ever want to go into that.
I
It is a
mean,
bit of a reader, but hey,
I'll get there. Emotions revealed. One sec. $12. Yep. And buy now. Oh, let me buy used. No.
yeah, buy used.
Let me buy used.
Back out. Back out.
Back.
Let me out. But yeah, it's a great book. I can't recommend it enough, just like the
Okay.
other two.
It's in my cart now. I will purchase that as soon as I get the chance, and I'll crack it. I'll crack it real soon. I'm juggling a lot of things right now because I'm trying to reacclimate myself to political philosophy as well as everything else. That's probably because of Cyberpunk Edge Runners, and that's hard and weird. I've got a lot of history in political philosophy and stuff, and it's opening a can of worms that I've been actively avoiding looking at because it's scary. It's rough, and our political system or the situation in politics is so it just turns me off. I don't want to look at it. I want to bury my head in the sand as far away as I can from the whole thing, and I don't think that I can do that anymore. But I'm reading politics stuff, I'm reading psychology stuff, and I'm reading art stuff, and all sorts of things. You gave me a slog of a book, so I'll recommend.
Give me a book.
I'll recommend a weird slog of a book back to you.
Sure.
This is Go to Lesher Bach. Have you read it?
I have not actually.
Okay, this is Hofstadter's attempt at explaining what consciousness is and why it matters. It comes from the origins being stories and media and ideas, but mostly from math, art, and music, and trying to seek out something about what is fundamentally true that is unchanging between all the things that seem to be changing and not true. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. You can tell a lot about a book by the cover. You can immediately see shadows on the wall of like different elements that are coming together, and one ideal that's structured in the center. And it's like, oh, okay, Hofstadter, there's an idea there.
You're like, I see it. I see where you're going with this. Yeah, I just actually added it to my Amazon right now. I was like, all right, done. There we go.
Good, cool. That one's a weird one, and it's still, I haven't seen anybody who's articulated the idea within it more concisely. And the problem is that the idea within it seems to be literally inarticulable. And that's something that you find in a bunch of religions, is like the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. The Tao that can be written is not the true Tao. Is like you can't actually say the thing. You can just look at it from a bunch of perspectives and provide a bunch of shadows, and that gets you a little bit closer to comprehension. Anyway, exactly. That's my book rec.
Something that I did want to bring up, because it was brought up to my attention, which was you trying to get into martial arts or something like that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It feels necessary to, there's a huge part of me that is capable of and interested in violence. And I'd like to explore it because it's scary and unknown. And I think I would extrapolate out to say that is a capacity that is in every human being, and we deny it at our own peril, because I think a lot of people view themselves as peaceful, happy, simple people, that are all very nice and very good, and that works really well when you're in a nice house, in a nice place, and things are going well. But I've been in places where it wasn't that way, and I've been in mental places where I was close to the edge of those autonomic responses. And if you don't have experience controlling yourself in those high tension situations, you're not in control, and you really aren't in control of yourself. And so I want to explore the space of violence and learn how to control myself within it, and do the dance that we've been doing for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years of being able to fight another person. The step that I took actually just this past Friday in relation to that is I was at the gym. And I saw a couple of kids at the heavy bags getting ready, and I ran over to one of them, big smile on my face, and I went, "Hi, I need to ask you for a huge favor. Please, 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 please." He's got gloves on. Please, 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 please punch me in the face. Not super hard, just like half your power. It doesn't matter. Please punch me in the face. And he's like, "What, dude? No, absolutely not." And he's looking at his friend like, "Dude, get me out of here. Get me out of here." And I'm like, "Please." And he looks at his friend. I'm like, "Okay, will you do it? Please punch me in the face just once." He goes, "Why?" Well, because I've never been punched in the face, and I really think that I'm missing something because that hasn't happened. I need to be a little bit humbled. And he's like, "No, dude, no." So I ask him, my friend comes over, he's like, "Look, he's been talking about wanting to do this for weeks. He's got this in order. I'm his ride home. You can punch him in the face and everything's going to be fine." And the guy's like, "All right, fine, man." And he rears back, and in the moment that he reared his fist back and looked me in the eyes and was ready to do it, I got exactly what I wanted. And every bit of it. And he punched me in the face, and it was like, okay, ow. It barely hurt. It was nothing. He's wearing boxing gloves. It was nothing. But the moment that another human being looked at me in the eyes with the willingness and ability to cause me direct harm, I was like, boom, done. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
You have it too. And I want to explore that part of me as well, because now the next thing is, now I know how it feels, and so I can have empathy, and I can choose when to punch somebody else in the face, and I can know what I'm causing. And so that process of feel the pain and be willing to express and explore the pain, there's something to it that's valuable.
And there's something beautiful about it. And I'm sure this is probably something that you don't know, but
Mhm.
aside from, having my own private practice, helping out, like doing group therapies and art therapy and everything with kids,
Yeah.
I also teach LFC and UFC fighters at my gym
Whoa.
here. Yeah.
Whoa.
I know that's something it might not look like it, but yeah, dude, that's why
You teach them fighting?
yeah, I teach
Where's
them.
where's your background? What traditions do you come from?
So it started off, we did a lot of Kempo and Judo
Okay.
growing up since I was like 2 or 3 years old
Yeah.
in the area that I'm located in. And for me, it's been consistent ever since I was a little kid. I'll DM you essentially
Wow.
where I'm at. And my brother at the moment, he's the main owner of one of the biggest gyms in, I'm not going to say where I'm at, but
In area. You
yeah,
don't have to dox yourself. You're okay.
in area in the desert, best way to put it. And
Okay.
we train
I
with a lot of
got you're
professional.
probably not that far from me, because I'm in desert space as well.
Oh, you see, there we go.
So we're probably within states of each other. I'm open about my general region because there are so many people here that it's not that dangerous. I live in Southern California.
Oh, I
So
live in Arizona.
okay, so we're not that terribly far from each other, and if we ever wanted to hang out, we could probably do so. But we have the internet, and it's much easier to do it that way. And so whatever, all is well.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like actually going through and learning martial arts. I always tell people,
Mhm.
hey, if you ever have the opportunity to, it's not like people may go in there with certain like anger issues, whatever, but at the end, a lot of even the biggest fighters know a lot about control and
Oh
know a
yeah.
lot about like the empathy that comes with delivering a good strike, some good pain. And then even with your sparring partners, if you let go a good roundhouse kick and you hit them and you hear that just
Oof.
like reverberates, like,
Oof.
the check-ins that happen, the
Yeah.
hey, you good? That
Yeah.
was a good fight.
The way
So
that you deal with consent, and there are so many little processes of touching gloves and shaking hands and making sure that we're doing this in good faith and we understand each other. It's what happened immediately after the guy punched me. I went, "Thanks, man, that was awesome," and we like fist bump, and I start to walk away. He went, "No, come here, give me a hug, give me a hug." I'm like, "Yeah, all right," and I come over, I give him a big hug. He gives me a big hug. He's like, okay, there we go. That's what's necessary. And like he needed that as part of his process of like, no, we're still good. Even though we don't know each other, we're essentially strangers. It's like, no, I don't want to cause a harm in this thing. We have to hug it out. And it's like, that's cool. That's something awesome.
Well, T, that's why I'm throwing that out there. Hey, in case you ever get into like full on like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna practice for a couple months, and you want to have a
Oh my
sparring match?
God.
I'm more than open, brother,
Oh, dude!
to have
Suddenly, so
that
that's so
participation.
cool. This is what happens when you reach out and you speak to the world about what you're interested in. Is that doors start opening to you because people actively want to help you most of the time. Is what I've noticed. Like so infrequently do I find people who really genuinely want to tear me down, and usually there's something going on that I can understand their perspective and why, and have some empathy for them. But most of the time when I express what I want. And that's what you talked about, communication and setting boundaries, right? You say the things that you don't want and you say the things that you do want. And if you're able to say the things that you do want, you stop being so damn resentful all the time. And
Yeah.
you start actually getting the things that you want, because the world, it's so weird, but humans have the ability to speak magic words. And those magic words are, if literally please, if you just say the words properly to the universe, I would really like to become better at blank. I would really like to have a better relationship with my blank. Or if somebody's in the way of you, hey, I'd really like to get around you. Could I please get around you? Every time they will move out of the way. Every time.
Right.
And if they don't, it's usually more a problem with them than it is with you and what you need, you know, and that's something else to deal with. But the first hurdle is being willing to, the way that one of my friends characterizes it is being willing to be a little bit selfish. And that little bit of selfish is just to say what you want and to
Right.
even have the willingness to want things, right? And if you can do that, the world seems to organize itself around you. It's like Rudy learning a little bit of magic. He just learns to speak, and then he does it with his family, and he experiments with the whole circumstance, and he's manipulative, and he's narcissistic, and he's stupid in it. But when he says
Yeah.
the magic words, and the magic words are the honest words, people give him what he actually wants, and it's bonker. It's mind blowing. It's exactly right.
And that's exactly the point, is if you put it out there, if you're able to talk about it somehow, in some way, shape, or form, the universe may be willing to help you out. Some doors open. The
Mm-hmm.
opportunity presents itself in weird and unique ways, which is why when I heard that, I was like, you know what? I'll throw it out there just in case T ever wants to go ahead and like have a couple rounds or fight in the
Yeah.
octagon.
Well,
We have a
well,
full
the
octagon ring
thing
set up and everything.
that's fucking amazing. Yes, I'll take you up on that at some point. Let me go
Yeah,
and at least take a couple of basic jujitsu classes and maybe some striking as well, and then I'll
sure. Yeah.
head over.
Yep.
Off of that, I want to recommend a manga to you that I think is really cool,
Please.
both psychologically and in terms of a sport that you care about. It's called
Sure.
Teppu,
Uh-huh.
TEPPU. It's about a couple of high school young women who are into MMA, and it explores reasons for fighting and stuff, and basically sets up the main character as the kind of person who's perfect at everything without trying,
Right.
and puts against her some foils that are different in their relationship to why they try and why they do what they do, and explores reasons for being a fighter in some pretty excellent ways that I think are really cool, and is very obviously written by somebody who's deeply passionate about the art of fighting itself more than they
Right.
are passionate about art. And is like learning the process of the art in order to try to express themselves and express their love for the sport. And it's
Right.
just gorgeous to read. So it's also quite short. It's like 8 volumes, and you can read it in a couple of hours, honestly, if you're
Oh, that's wonderful.
something you could probably pull up on stream and just charge through. And if you do, I mean, let me know, because I'll pop into that and I'll watch.
I'll let you know. I already have it pulled up right here. I was like, wait a
Rad.
minute, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's I think it's rad. It's some cool stuff, and the artist really sort of understands fighting in a way that a lot of fighting manga artists don't. And has
Uh-huh.
clearly been in some real fights, and so seeing that perspective is really fantastic and fascinating and super cool. Okay, cool.
But yeah, and yeah, that's why I'll go ahead and throw it out there, guys. You don't have to be in shape to be the best fighter. I'll even throw
Oh
this out
yeah,
there. A lot of coaches, myself included, because I tend to coach now, aren't necessarily like 6 pack, 12 pack,
yeah.
whatever. But their training that they've had, either jujitsu experts, which phenomenally respected, boxing, so on and so forth,
Mm.
can drive a young man up a wall.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I'll just throw that up there, like take that first step. It tends to be a very friendly, welcoming environment. A lot of these places do tend to be that way because we were all that person at one time.
Right. Been there,
So
and so the welcoming is like, join us. We figured out a thing that works. Come and dance with us.
right,
Come and do this dance where we do the martial arts, because it keeps working. And I keep seeing that in people that have some legitimate martial arts training, because I also see the McGym stuff, right? And I see the kids who get churned out with this overconfidence and lack of understanding, and that's not the same idea. So make sure, evaluate your environment carefully when you go into one, but go into one because all of the people are going to be like, we found a way of being that works, and it works physically, and it works psychologically, and it works in integrating the two, and it works socially and in integrating and dealing with other people, and it lets you work more effectively in the world if you explore this part of yourself. And so that's why I'm compelled by it, and why I need to explore it more,
Right.
because it's really interesting. I think a lot of people get kind of get squeamish around violence
Right.
as a whole thing, and it's ignoring a huge part of what you actually are. And like many other things, when you squeeze that part down and you repress it and push it away, it spills out the cracks elsewhere, and you're going to find yourself acting out violence without any semblance of understanding why you're doing it or how to control it. And so you really want to explore that space and know it, and know your monsters.
Well, and that's the key thing there. It's, if you have a lot of tools in your toolbox and some of them aren't, ready for when you have to use them, what good are they for?
What good are they? Yeah.
So that's why I'm throwing that out there. Make sure that you guys have good coping skills. Make sure that you guys have good support structures. And third off, make sure that you guys are able to go ahead and do what makes you you.
Oh boy, that's good. That's good stuff.
But, one thing I want to ask you is, where do you see your content going in the future? What's changing for you? What do you?
All over the place. So some things are never going to change. Acting in reaction to media, like not necessarily reacting, but taking the thing and speaking about it from a perspective and trying to do that analysis. That process is so core and part and parcel to who I am and what I do and the way that I see myself. Really, I think that the ideal of person of consciousness is something like a person who is capable of parsing truth from fiction, watching the greatest, most dense pieces of truth or fiction and parsing what is true and false about them and talking about it and expressing it as well as they can. And so that's the ideal that I hold up on high and say, I want to be that. And that's what I mean by I'm the best, is I want to be that, right? I'm aiming to be the best, and I challenge anybody to fight me. And the reason that I put it in those challenge terms is because in so many of the manga and anime and things that I've read, the need for rivalry and competition and the way that other people find different ways of achieving the same goal that you would have never thought of is fascinating. So I want to strike this balance between that sort of foolish competitiveness that you talked about before, where it's like, well, we're not really competing because we're both doing similar things, pushing in the same directions in a similar space. And there are so many people watching that we're not really competing for their attention because they're able to switch back and forth. At some point we will be, because we're competing for attention with all of the dopaminergic systems that are out there, which is hellish, by the way, because you're competing with phone games, and phone games are optimized to murder your ability to do other things, right? They're optimized. Gacha games are optimized to randomly reward you like a mouse pushing a button as much as possible, And so we're competing against that. And the magical thing is that stories really have enough compelling power to get people to step away from their addictions and move towards something better. And so talking about them seems like the most valid and most worthwhile thing that I can imagine, by far.
And that's why, at least in this space, the way that I look at it is like rising tides raise all ships.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is being able to go ahead and have communication, being able to even be like, hey, you know what? T is doing this amazing thing. And I always do shout outs and all of that, like towards wonderful creators that I find in the space. Because at the end of the day, people are, if people find the competition between one another, it can turn into a nasty game of put down rather than like, hey, we're all in the same space. We, for some reason, all lined up in some way, shape, or form, time-wise, and let's go ahead and help one another out.
This is a zeitgeist. There's something there's a flow that's happening here in terms of people experiencing content, and Let's Players are a part of it, and commentators are a part of it, and reactors are a part of it. And I don't know what it is, but we keep seeing it from all these different perspectives. And it's something about the ability to socialize around media and the ability to communicate with each other about what matters and to really focus on stuff. Something about it is important with like capital letters and like we need it. Yeah, man. It's cool. It's really cool. The other answer to your question about where my content
Sure.
is going in the future is more toward this. Less me talking alone and more me talking too much with other people, because that's
Right.
that's the next sort of development. And the fact that about a dozen times during this conversation, you've said a thing that has made me think more thoughts than I would have thought on my own. And I think that
Mhm.
I've done the same thing in reverse, back and forth, and
Definitely.
that we've pushed against each other in a way that has solidified both of us in different and better ways is extraordinary and exceptional and amazing. And I think it's really cool, and I want to pursue more of it. And this is sort of a test run because you are the first person that I'm doing that with. But
Thank you.
test is working. So that's really cool. And then the last thing that I'll mention before I'll just hand it back over to you is that hopefully the mutualism works as well, which is like on YouTube, at least I've got a much bigger subscriber base than you do. I'm still tiny fish, but if any percentage of my 30,000 are like, oh, that was an interesting conversation with this guy who maybe has a cool perspective that I want on anime, and they click the red button under you, and you get a couple dozen subs, that's a jump that is like not nothing, right? And so maybe we can get some of that mutualism going, because while there are a lot of creators with their heads down, there are also a lot of viewers with their heads down who are like, I watch this person and that's it. And like, I only watch this person, I judge everyone else as unworthy. And I think if we were to have more conversations like this one, where we get everybody talking about what we're doing and why we're doing it, well, we might find out that some of the answers for those people are like, well, cause it makes money. Why wouldn't I be doing the anime? It makes the monies, and I get the rich. But I don't think that that's generally at the base of it. I think most of it is coming from a place of love, and I think that we could spread that love around for real in a really cool way.
Definitely. And even when it comes to like, because in YouTube it's still growing out. There's a good period of time where I stopped making videos on YouTube and was like Twitch only, and then people are able to go ahead and go follow, love, like, subscribe, comment on your videos as well, all of that stuff. It's not like, and that's why I always say that out. It's not a competition, at least on my side. It never is. It's all about love and growth and understanding. Hey, we're all in a journey of trying to understand what it is, what the journey in of itself is, and how we're trying to impact our goals. So
we're
and
alive, and
yeah,
there's a lot of stuff out there that wants to eat humans, essentially, in terms of like the space and the void and the earth and the gravity and the monsters and the psychic demons and the weird things and all of a lot of stuff. And the only thing that doesn't seem to want to really hurt you is other yous, as far as other people. And so maybe be nice to them and be good to them, and maybe they'll be good to you too, and maybe you can find some compassion and some love and some solace in growing together, and maybe that's what's worthwhile.
And with that, I'll throw this out there for all viewers of both sides or whatever. Hey, just because we find some good discussion elements in a character, right? Someone you may love, because we all grow attached to certain characters, and we may not agree with loving them 1,000% as a character, doesn't mean that we don't love them in the story. We can criticize characters because that's what they're there for, an element, and good, bad, this is abuse, this is whatever, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad story. No, what we're talking about is a character's actions or what's happening in that environment. It's not like we're treating them like they're an actual person and we're like, no, so on and so forth. Because
they're a reflection. They're a reflection. They're a lens. They're a way of seeing through to what actually are those environments and those actions in reality. So when you see a character do something that's like, in the Mushoku Tensei sense, a lot of the time what we see Rudy do is something that's outwardly considered like perverted or unsociable or exploitative or harmful, specifically toward girls in his life. And you see that, and it's like all the layers of identification with your own desires and your own ability to cause that harm, and your maybe your repressed ability to cause that harm, and man, you have a reaction to it. Whichever way you go, you've got a reaction to it. And then when people attack it, you've got a reaction to that. And that's the cool part, is you get people coming into the comments and going like, well, Rudy's obviously a bad person and is bad this way, and you've got 12 3-page comments as people are like, no, he's not because XYZ, and he didn't actually do any things, and it didn't actually go that way, and it's like all this justification and interesting stuff, and it's, wow, what a reflection upon the person who's writing it, and what an interesting process of discussion and reflection and evaluation that really occurs around just relationships to a character that doesn't exist, who's a few lines on paper photographed and made to move. Like, it's barely even close to a person, but we can extrapolate and we put all of ourselves into him or into those characters.
Which is why it's amazing. It's amazing. And me and I have another psychologist friend who does in-depth analysis as well. We were talking about it, and we're like, it's always interesting because people tend to jump in and try and justify actions, right? Instead of try and talk about what led up to those actions or the character situations that led up to that. And that's where a lot of like the meat is in that, because a lot of people, that's where you start seeing a lot of that like projection, a lot of that displacement that people start projecting their own selves into these characters. And it's like, well, he needed to do this. This is why the action happened, so on and so forth. And
couldn't have done it otherwise. It's this because that's why I did it that way. Yeah. That's in my life. That's why I feel this way. And you immediately can see through. Yeah.
And that's why it's always interesting to see what, like, there's a difference between like justifying, the character and like the journey that they're going through versus justifying the actions that they take. And that's a big one with that. But aside from that, hey, it's always good to listen to other perspectives, good and bad, other creators out there, because not everyone's going to line up with your opinion 1,000%. But that's the purpose as to why it's always good to be exposure to different ideas, different knowledge bases, and all.
It hurts though, man. It's hard. It's so hard to just do the simple humility, the small humility of just, I don't know everything, right? Or even a step beyond that, that's even harder, is that the things that I know so deeply that I know them, I might be wrong. And I might have to let go of those things that I know so well, right? And when you face the unknown and you face the world, that's what's so scary, is that you might discover that the way that you are and the way that you think doesn't work. And something about the unknown proves it that way. And it's human culture throughout time. We killed Galileo for it because he said that the world wasn't the way that we thought it was. And I think individually as humans, we have these like Galileo-like moments of eureka and ideas all the time. And a lot of the time we get into a habit of killing them, of tearing them down, because they threaten the stability of the whole system. But when you pursue them and you're open to those changes, you can change and you can start to identify with the thing that changes instead of with the thing that is rigid. And it feels so freeing. It feels so alive-ing. It feels like identifying with the core concept of being alive itself. And it works.
Right.
Oh, rad. Okay, we're coming past the 2-hour mark. How do you want to move toward wrapping this?
How about well, I have a question that we can lead into, like, I guess like our exits, rather well said, right?
Okay, cool.
So my question for you is, what is something most people get wrong about your reactions or about your content?
In what way? What do you mean that people get wrong?
What is something that you feel? How about that? People get wrong about your reactions or your content or all of that.
So
and I'm leaving it vague. I'm leaving it vague on purpose.
I understand that. I'm still going to ask another clarifying question, because it's the problem that I'm having is the which perspective am I trying to put myself into? Am I saying something that people get wrong about my intent, or something that people get wrong about the way that I do things, or something that people get wrong about what?
So why don't we go with intent, because that is clear. Okay. Like the way you brought that up was very logically based, which is beautifully. So we'll go with your first point there.
Okay. In intent. Well, okay. So I'll go with the thing that I get relatively frequently, which is something that you brought up earlier. It's that people get wrong the idea that this is easy, because as far as I'm concerned, I've worked in a couple of different fields. I've worked in manual labor. My father's a contractor, and I've done a lot of manual labor. I've worked in intellectual labor. I've done a lot of programming for a couple of different companies, and I've done this artistic labor, whatever the fuck it is. And by far, this is the hardest thing that I've ever done in terms of work. So people get that wrong in terms of the overall difficulty, as far as I'm concerned, of this thing. Because it's all self-directed and it's absurd, and it like, there's nobody requiring me to go into work every day who's gonna fire me. There's no system of support to help. It's just terror and the unknown continuously.
Right.
And so I think that's the other thing that I think people get wrong, and I'm working on it because it's my fault that they get it wrong in terms of my intent. I think people think that I come at these shows from the perspective of I am good at understanding these things, and I know what I'm talking about. And that is the opposite of the perspective that I'm coming at them with. I'm coming at them as like the humble worshiper at the feet of an insane mythology that's way beyond what I could create. You know, when I watch something like Kill la Kill or one of the other Imaishi shows, it's like a religious experience. It's like, wow, even. I don't understand 1% of 1%. And so I have this habit of framing things in terms of this is the way that this is, and this is what this means in the story, when I really should be able to more effectively communicate that as I currently, while I put on this one particular lens and wear this one particular mask, see this thing in this piece of media from this perspective and think that it is somewhat aligned with this concept. But of course, brevity is the soul of wit. And so you cut all that part out immediately and try and get to this is that. And I don't actually know if this is that. I'm just trying it on a lot of the time. Right. And so people mistake the way that I phrase things for certainty, when really it is the process of imagining potential or like trying on that fantasy or trying on one option or one perspective and then jumping back out of it. Yeah. So then I want to reflect that question. I don't like doing this back and forth in discussion too much. It feels cheap to just be like, well, I'd put the same question back to you. It seems more fun to come up with your own questions. Sure, when you're making your content, what do you feel like people get wrong about what you're doing?
So I think it's always an interesting question that like people stumble upon, or like, you know, just thinking about it. Because as you were going through it, I was like, yeah, I agree with that. You know, people think it's a little like, people are like, oh yeah, this is easy, when in reality it's like, hey, this is a lot of hard work coming in here. Well,
people go, I watch anime. All I would have to do is turn on a camera and then watch anime, and I would be doing the same thing that you're doing. And it's like, cool. I'm glad that you think that it's that easy. That means that there's no barrier for you to try. Go ahead and try it. Just go ahead and try it. Try to extemporaneously without any prep, talk for an hour of interesting, valuable discussion that other people will take something from about an episode of anime. Try it. Try to talk for 5 minutes about an episode of anime. See if you're good at it, and you might be, and that might be really cool. But it ain't easy.
Right. No, it's not easy, and I think it's always interesting, right? Because this is sort of like the thing. There is people are like, oh, I hate when people say this, but I do. They're like, you're a wizard because you're able to go ahead and like predict so many plot points and like characters and like that. And it's like, no, what I'm using is psychology. And I always like to like demystify it and say, I'm using Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. I'm talking about Maslow. I'm talking about like all these psychological concepts to be able to say, hey, based on these characters' actions, this might be coming down in the line. Or if I was if I was writing this is what I would start influencing certain actions. It's not just throwing out random plot prediction, the random points out there. It's like, this is all based off of the human nature so far as to I know it, and off of the psychological principles that come through. And it's also, I guess I'll touch on this. Remember how we said at the very beginning to pin the whole photography
yes
thing?
Yeah,
for me, I love doing this, right? And I love doing it live because chatters are running through it. Because for me, this is exactly like that, right? You can have a psychologist that all he does is one case in one time, but for me, I'm coming through and I'm watching all of these anime and I'm doing thousands and thousands of characters, running through them in a therapeutic basis in my head.
Yeah, and each character is like a condensation of 1,000 people, right? Exactly. Each character is like a DSM-4 diagnosis walking around, or like a combination of them, or a set of complexes walking around, and so you get to, when you're parsing what's going on in their world, and also asking the more important questions that you mentioned before of like, where did they come from and how did they get here and why are they the way that they are? You're doing the process that is your job and your passion, which I from talking to you, I think you've effectively aligned your passion with your work, right?
Right.
So and that seems like a crucial thing that a lot of people don't have done. It's like the guy I was talking about who's an artist, who's a cashier. It's like his
Right.
job and his passion are not aligned in whatsoever. It seems like psychology is your passion and
Right.
you're doing it, and so it's aligned. But you're able to do that more and more effectively, and I'll bet that in your practice you've found that things that you've already expressed certain examples of it, but the things that you've learned from anime have made you a better psychologist. I would
1,000%.
get a thousand
Yeah,
percent,
1,000%.
1,000%.
And I'll drop it like this: a coworker and I presented the same case, right? 'Cause sometimes you're given case studies and
Mm-hmm.
stuff to go through. I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to go from point A to point Z like that because of
Yeah.
all the inferences and structures and characters and resolve and complexes.
Yep.
Meanwhile, they're still like, so let's go ahead and start at the very beginning with family structure, and it's like I've already gone past that because I'm able to
I've
go
got
ahead
the
and make
archetype. You've enabled your pattern recognition systems because that's what we're so good at, right? And so if you see
right.
those patterns enough times and you've seen 20 like poorly attached, anxious protagonist characters who are sort of like get glomped onto by the sexy female character who's just like, you're coming into my world now, and they get their whole world opened up. You're like,
Yeah.
boom, archetype, done, thing
Right.
easy.
And you're always able to, of course, be empathetic, use humanistic interventions,
And
be there
everybody's
for
an
them.
individual, but you can see
Yeah.
patterns, man.
You can see the patterns and you can align those patterns beautifully so that they can understand it as well and be like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, this is happening. And it's like,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, this is
So,
happening. And that's the crazy thing, is that when you start explaining and exploring what's really going on in people's lives that's affecting them, it's like opening the window to them, opening the door inside a stuffy room, and like light and air. Oh, hope because if I can understand it, then maybe I could change it. It's magical. Regarding your point about being like a wizard, I do the exact same thing in terms of predictions, but I come at it from the literary and film sense, which is that
right.
I've read so many TV tropes and watched so much film and watched so much media and experienced so many things, including those like historical films and the old film where the things have come from, and then of course the literature where they were based in, and some expressions of the visual media that they're based in, that I've got those pattern recognition systems as well. And it's like probably the most common thing that I'm right about is the death flag, right? I see a character and I'm like, that guy's dead. That guy's dead by end of episode or in 2 episodes. He's been introduced. He's already talking about his girlfriend back home and how much he can't wait to see her. Pattern accomplished. Guy's dead, right? And it's gonna be brutal, but we just know enough about him to make it hurt, and that's the pattern. But you see it in all sorts of characters, and it's exactly that predictive ability. And so what I would say is, by watching enough anime, you can improve your patterns based on the patterns produced by some of the smartest, best pattern makers or pattern extractors in the world, because they were capable of doing art and capable of observing the people around them and turning it into something concise and interesting. You can read those and spend as little time as you can doing so, and then take those patterns and use them in your real life. In the real world, and they will actually work. And that's the crazy thing. And part of my drive in anime that you actually just by saying that and by talking about it here, that's reawakened a spark that I haven't been in touch with for a little bit, as a bit of a revelatory moment, which is that I want to prove that the way of being of shonen protagonists essentially is the ideal way of being. Which is like, the world is full of challenges. I'm gonna face them head on and shoot for the stars. It's like the One Piece. I'm gonna go find the puzzle piece that's missing in the world and find a bunch of friends and go out into the world and build a crew of people, and we're gonna go out and do whatever it is that we do, you know? Or Naruto is like, I want to be the leader of humanity, and I want to lead us into the future. I want to lead a village and lead a whole system, and he goes through the process of doing that, and it's, I want to prove that works, you know?
Yeah.
Because I
And
think it
overall,
works.
I think it does too. And it's overall, like games and whatnot, makes us a lot more empathetic. Because guess what? Someone going through a similar struggle, you can empathize with that person. And please, I hate when people are like, I'm an empath. Not being an empath, but like literally being there for someone, being
Yes.
empathetic and being there in the moment with them.
Yes.
It helps a ton with being able to relate emotions, feelings, and all
Hell
these
yeah.
concepts by just like narrowing them down to like an anime, a video game character, so on and so
Hell
forth.
yeah.
So gas power.
I'll jump off of that and ask something important, or that I think is
Sure.
important at least. Have you played any of the FromSoft games? The Souls
Like which
games.
one? Yes.
Dark Souls 1 through 3 and Bloodborne and then Elden Ring, and there's also a couple of other ones. Yeah,
So
yes, you have.
I've played Elden Ring, and I
Okay.
think I played one of the Dark Souls a long time ago.
Okay. Cool. I would recommend, if you get the chance, just think about what Dark Souls is and how it functions. The structure of it, the way the monsters work, the way that the fights are difficult, and the way that if we are Homo ludens, right, then
Yeah.
the systems that you play in and the games that you play in and the way that they work alter your way of play. And I have this theory that the Souls games alter people really significantly into people who are able to self-evaluate and actively change. And I think
Yeah.
that they're some of the most powerful therapeutic devices that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I say it because I got my friend into Elden Ring because he was like, I don't know if I want to play. I don't know if I play this game. And I was like, dude, the company that makes the best games just came out with the best game and it looks cool. And he was like, I don't know. Oh, they're a samurai. Okay, I'll play a samurai. And it's like, wow, you found the identity that's you in this thing. And he's played through it like twice and gotten overwhelmed by it and still only sees it as mythos. He hasn't put it together as like, well, in Elden Ring, you have to go out and you have to find monsters to fight. Like, you can spend the entire game, if you want to, sitting in the starting area and doing nothing. And it won't tell you not to. Nothing's going to prevent you.
I love Elden Ring.
Elden
Like
Ring's
I
sick.
genuinely, it was because for me it was a game of exploration, right?
Yeah,
In some way, shape, or form. Because of course, chat was like, "You got to be a wench. You got to be a wench. You got to start off with like,
of course.
nothing."
Of course.
Ended up somehow finding uh a dragon that was asleep and overly leveling myself up to like, and I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
the big old dying dragon, I think,
yeah,
is the
and
one
like
you yeah.
over leveled to the point where all of a sudden the actions that I was taking in character was so different than those that are so struggling at the beginning. And you're like, oh, that's actually very introspective. And the way that you die and you have to
Yeah.
think about how, what did
Yes.
I do wrong? How am I improving?
Yes,
Or
yes.
yeah,
I love the boss fight cycle in games like that, right? So there's this obstacle that's a boss that's in front of you, and beyond them is just the unknown. It's a fog wall into you don't know, right? You just know that
right,
it's progress, right? It's a stumble forward. And so you go up against this wall, and the wall isn't just a wall, it's a wall with teeth, and the teeth eat you in all these complicated ways, and you go and you go and you go and you go. And what you see in novice players is they're all scared and they're hiding behind a shield and they're running away and stuff. But you see in experienced players is they run straight in head first and let the thing kill them, right? Because they're only going to
right,
learn by letting, you try as best as you can to get as much damage done so that you can figure out the boss, because that's what it starts becoming. It changes
yeah,
from being a game of win the fight to win the puzzle. Figure out the
yeah,
puzzle. Figure out one more piece than I had before. Get to stage 2 and see what stage 2 is. Get to stage 3 and see what stage 3 is. And every time you live, die, repeat, live, die, repeat, live, die, repeat, you iterate a little bit. And isn't that life? Isn't that every day, every time you try something?
okay,
And that's the thing about the Souls games that I think is so compelling, is that you don't have to try, but you won't get anywhere. You can stay right in the safe place in Firelink Shrine or in the safe space by a bonfire as long as you want, but you have to go out into the wild, chaotic world if you want the resources that you need to improve yourself, and if you want to understand the world that you're in and why you're here. And that's reality.
exactly.
It's like a better picture of reality than reality.
Yep.
It's excellent.
And that's exactly it. And even make it scarier. If you didn't move out of
Mm.
that starting zone, someone would have been an Elden Lord.
Mm.
And your reality, as I said, time is going to open that door, like it or not, would have
Yeah.
been significantly worse.
Yeah.
So, even inaction is an action.
Yes.
So I
It is a
always love throwing
choice.
it out there. A
Yeah,
choice, yeah.
it's a choice to not choose. I've been throwing that out as because it's a classic philosophical problem, and I find it very useful. It's the train tracks problem,
Right.
and I put it out this way: there's a train that's barreling down the tracks. You walk into this environment, you didn't know you were coming into here. You step into a room, and suddenly there's a train coming down a track. On one side of the tracks are two people, and the train is currently headed toward the two people. On the other side of the track is one person, and there's a lever. You know that you can get to the lever, and if you switch the lever, the two people, it switches over to being directed toward the one person. Do you touch the lever? And the first response that I get from a lot of people is, if I touch the lever, I damn myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's cowardice.
You have to, yeah. Yeah.
If you're capable of acting, then you have to take the responsibility for it. And you have to take the responsibility that no matter what you do, pain will be caused, but you can try to reduce the pain if you can.
So even through that, if they didn't choose any action, the guilt that would come from that would be tremendous. And the pain that
Destructive,
would
yeah.
come from that would be destructive as well.
Yeah.
So no matter what, taking an action is the only thing to do in that regard.
Yes. And there's an extension of the problem that I think is really, really extraordinary that my friend came to, which is what he said was, fuck this, I hate this problem, I'm gonna go try to tear up the train tracks and divert the train some other way, right? I do not accept the problem space that you've laid out for me. And I was like, yes, exactly, great, okay, amazing. You're gonna try something experimental and try to break out of the system that you've been given. Before you try that, do you move the lever?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. So because your crazy plan might not work, and if your crazy plan doesn't work, then you're consigning the two people to death. So you do the thing that you can do to reduce suffering because you know it'll work, and then you do the thing that might work that's crazy. And and that's it. Bada bing, bada boom. You're going to make ethical decisions as you move through life, throughout your life, and you have to make them from that kind of a paradigm because there's no train track without a person on it. Not yet. Yeah. And maybe you could build one, but you're going to have to build it.
So, and even through that, hey, sometimes in life, you are going to have to make a choice. Like it or not, you have to make certain choices that the only thing you'll be able to go ahead and do is reflect back upon and be like, if I was placed in a similar situation now, what would my choice be?
Mm-hmm.
So reflection choices are key to growth, key to introspection, and key to being able to go ahead and, I don't know, start doing something called growing, which is scary.
Mm-hmm. Growing, integrating, becoming maybe. I love becoming as an active word. What are you doing? I'm becoming. Because I'm not being yet. Being implies I'm already there, and I'm not doing yet exactly. I'm in the process of becoming. I'm heading somewhere, and I don't know what I'm becoming, but I'm becoming, and I like to identify with that. I think it's really good. Good. Awesome, dude. This has been rad. This has been a really cool conversation, man. Whoa, we did it. 2.5 hours down.
I didn't know where this conversation was gonna lead into, but it led in like the most beautiful way, like out there.
Oh
dude.
yeah,
like,
we spiraled out in a couple of awesome directions and managed to bring it back down to the core, I think, and answer those core questions that we were getting at. I think obviously. I think we both understand completely that there's no duel here. There's no gauntlet being thrown. There's no desire to actually like fight, and really no desire to prove myself the best, except as a tool for myself to improve this process and to figure out what better might mean. You know, So nothing but love and respect, and hopefully people don't take the whole like hark ye, you challenger for the title.
I read that so like hark ye, like just over the top, like hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to just start the dialogue in a silly way and stumble forward. And what's awesome is we found some stable footing. I think because I think we're actually on the same page on a lot of things, and I think that's really cool to figure out because it means that. Well, if we convergently evolved a couple of the same situations, and you did so with more grounding in one field, and I did so with more grounding in another set of fields, then maybe there's something we've seen it from a couple angles, and maybe there's something true about the process, and exactly. That's so fulfilling and so reassuring. Because maybe we're not wasting our lives talking about Chinese cartoons. Maybe we're doing something useful by talking about them, and that's good.
Well, honestly, yeah, that's one of the big things there. I was like, whoa, all right, cool. Like we're sort of hitting on a lot of points together, and it's reassuring the fact like, hey, you know what? Maybe we're not that wild. Maybe we're not that like, our brains are out there. We're just out in the vast openness of nothing. We're actually doing something and kind of grounded.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can put it.
Maybe I'm not totally crazy. Maybe I am, and maybe you are too. Though that's the issue. Yeah. You can get a couple people who are crazy in the same way, and they'll just confirm everything for each other. But I don't think so. yeah. I don't think so, man. I think we're onto something, and I wish and I hope you the absolute best of both fortune and the thing that isn't fortune, that is you putting in the effort as you push forward through it, because I don't like ascribing things as much to luck. And While I recognize that personally in my journey to become a YouTuber, there's been luck available and absolutely is there, and privilege and certain things. The fact that I've had schooling on some of these things is enormous as a privilege. But if I can
Right.
turn those things into good, then I'm going to. And if you can overcome luck and make the impossible possible, and reject fate. I mean, that's a Kamina line from Gurren Lagann, is reject fate and make the impossible possible. And I
Right.
believe it, man. And I believe that what we're doing is an extension of what Hiroyuki Imaishi is doing when he wrote and drew that piece of media, or helped do so. Like, it's that expression of a way of being in art, and in talking about art, and in story, and in song, and in as many ways as possible. And now in dialogue between the two of us. And that seems worthwhile. And maybe we'll find out that it's not, because maybe nobody will watch any of the videos that we put up. But I look
Right.
forward to taking this video and chopping it up, and putting up one version of it, and you putting up a version of it in your way. And I think, are we good with that in terms of, let's just talk about it publicly? Rights
Sure.
to both of this video is mutualistic and shared.
Bro, you know I love
Excellent.
you. I respect you. You're absolutely
Sick.
amazing. Yes,
Sick, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, you
Like,
put up a video, and if you want to link to my channel in it, do so. I'm gonna put up a video. I'm gonna link to you and your stuff in it, and direct people to go to it. And I think that more than me directing them to you, the process of us actually talking and your face being on screen is gonna do something really interesting. And I don't know what's gonna happen. So
yeah.
let's step out into that
And,
unknown, right? It's so sick.
but
Okay.
with that, I think one thing we probably should do is an outro for both of us, right?
Okay.
At least stating our names or something.
Cool. Yes.
Because I think that'll help. But with that, I do want to say, dude, I've loved and respected you from like the first moment I was aware of your channel. Like, I was like, literally for the past, I don't know, like whenever you came up with Mushoku Tensei episode 1, they
Mhm.
were in my Discord, like, you have to check out T, you have to check out T, man.
Yep.
So I just literally sat down and I've been like, wow, this is actually really, really good content.
So
Like, this
that
is
was
something
13 or
that,
14 weeks ago. So
yeah,
a few months.
a
So
couple months
that's
ago,
how
yeah.
long you've been aware of me. I've seen your name get dropped a few times.
Uh-huh.
Basically, I pay attention when people say like, oh yeah, I'm watching blank 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 by blank blank blank. I'm like, okay, what's going on there? Is there something intriguing? Do they have something that I can steal? Do they have interesting ways of doing content? And so the people that came up, and it's the reason that I mentioned you when I did sort of the title mention. I was like, I think I'm the
Right.
best, and there are these other people that I think are doing good things in the space too. Is like, you and Film Buff seem to stand out as people who are actively engaging with content, and like actively reading the media that we watch. And that was my exposure to you, and it was to my great joy to find out that that's exactly what I found you doing, was wielding the sword that you've been given in terms of your psychology knowledge, and or that you've earned for yourself, I should say, because you forged it for yourself. You weren't given it.
I wish I was giving it.
It would be nice, right? But that
Oh, yeah.
you've earned for yourself, and you're using it to parse the media. And it was like, whoa, yeah, that guy's got a thing. Cool. Let's get that to be more of a collective thing, because it should be.
Right. And
Rad.
exactly. And that's my number one thing is, man, even outside of this, just know that like it's all love, and like we're always gonna be like hitting you up and making sure you're good, and especially if there's any big events or anything, hey man, if you come on Twitch, we love you, we're gonna support you there as well. So
I'm
we
into
got
it. I'm into it. I will move. I will say, I am the kind of person who will take strides towards things I am uncomfortable with. I am uncomfortable with live streaming. I will take strides toward live streaming more, because it's worthwhile, and it's a big space with a lot of people listening, and it seems more direct and efficient in a lot of ways than doing the recorded content thing, especially given the overhead of editing is like a lot. So that it provides some freedom and some ability. So I'm down. I'm down to do that, and invite me, and I'll try to make myself say yes instead of say no, because I have a tendency to say no to things as an underlying me thing. I'll try to make myself say yes, because this has been good, and we can continue in that direction. And I think that will be more good. Yeah.
I'm just excited for the future. That's absolutely wonderful. I'm so happy to be able to connect with you.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll state my name and say
Mm-hmm.
goodbye so that people know. My name is Edgar, whichever one you prefer. People just call me Psyculturist. I tend to go live on Twitch Fridays and Sundays for anime, video game analysis, everything in between. It's chosen for those people that do come into the chat. We spin a wheel. Whatever gets chosen, we go for. There's no
Whew.
a pre anything. It's just go, go, go,
Ooh,
go, go.
that's
It
crazy.
is it's an amazing time. Everyone in the community is very open, very loving. And if you
Mhm.
have anything, if, for example, you're going through a really rough time and you need some psychological advice or some friendly advice, rather well said, we do have everything set up so that you can get some friendly advice via either myself or another psychologist that comes onto the channel and helps from time to time. So I appreciate y'all. Go check out T as well if you're watching it on my side. T, and do you want to say your final goodbyes and stuff?
Yes, absolutely. I'm T. I've been T-Aboo for a while, but I'm moving toward being T of T Talks Too Much. I talk too much about a lot of stuff, and I'm going to expand the realms within which I talk too much. And I talk a lot about things that I don't know, in hopefully a way that expresses that I don't know them yet. And I'd love for you to come join me as we explore them together and figure out more about this insane world that we're in and the incredible people who are continuing to make incredible art that does a better job of expressing things that seem to be true about this world than I can do on my own. So that's why I spend my time evaluating art and media and talking about things. And gosh, it's been a hell of a journey. I guess I'll just say I'm a person who dropped all of my stability in order to pursue this goal. I dropped being a computer programmer with a good salary in order to leave everything behind and make YouTube videos about dumb cartoons and try to prove that there's something way more valuable than just being dumb cartoons in these really cool, really compelling pieces of media that we're talking about. And I'd love to have more people along for the ride. So,
Oh,
so there it is. Nothing but love for
nothing but
Ed,
love.
and nothing but love for anime as a whole, and nothing but love for the audience.
Yeah.
My tagline is "Being is good," and I think it's true, and I think you can prove it to yourself by acting it out in the world. And that's my piece.
There you go. Practice some self-care, y'all. We love you.
Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, be proud, be you, do an action, clean your desk. That's it.
That's it. 1%. Tiny changes. Do things.
Yeah,
Do more stuff. Step into the unknown pain. Okay, we cram in as many cool things at the end as we can. Thank you so much for joining me for this fantastic discussion. I feel like we did some really cool things here, and I cannot wait to get this out there to the world. So, without further ado, appreciate you, love
I
you,
appreciate you.
and peace, man.
Have a great night. Thank you so much. Love you, mate.
All right, peace.
Peace.